The courtroom was packed, the air heavy with tension. Reporters from every major news outlet, cameras flashing, filled the seats. On one side, Elon Musk sat in a crisp black suit, his usual confident demeanor replaced with a rare sense of solemnity. The prosecution had made its case. The charges: fraud. Musk, the brilliant tech mogul behind Tesla and SpaceX, was accused of manipulating stock prices, deceiving investors, and causing a financial disaster that left thousands of people in ruins. But this wasn't just any trial. This was the trial of the century. The man who had transformed the way the world thought about electric cars, the man who had promised to send humanity to Mars, was now facing the possibility of losing everything. The prosecutor's voice rang through the courtroom, each word punctuated by the bitter accusations. And while millions invested their hard-earned money, Musk lived a lavish life, prioritizing personal gain over the well-being of his investors. Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence is clear. This is fraud of the highest order. Musk sat motionless. He didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. His sharp eyes flickered from the prosecutor to the jury, and then he did something no one expected. He stood up. Slowly. The murmurs in the courtroom died down as everyone turned their attention to him. The judge looked at him, raising an eyebrow. "Mr. Musk, do you wish to respond to the accusations?" Musk's voice was calm, almost unnervingly so. "I'll respond," he said, his words cutting through the tense silence like a blade. There was a brief pause. The room held its breath. Then Musk did something that no one in that room could have anticipated. "I'm not guilty," he began, his tone unwavering, "but I am hiding something. Something much bigger than you can imagine." A collective gasp filled the air. The courtroom shifted in its seats, trying to process what Musk had just said. The media scribbled frantically, eager to report the shocking turn of events. The judge slammed his gavel. "Mr. Musk, this is not the time for theatrics." But Musk didn't seem to care about the reprimand. His next words, delivered with cold certainty, struck the room like a thunderclap. "I'm not just a businessman. I've never been just an entrepreneur," Musk continued, his gaze now locked on the jury. "I am an agent, an operative for a much more powerful organization. I'm the CIA's top man." The courtroom fell into stunned silence. The prosecutor's mouth hung open. The jury exchanged confused glances. Even the judge seemed momentarily at a loss for words. "Mr. Musk," the judge began, his voice quivering with disbelief. "This is highly irregular." "No, it's the truth," Musk interrupted, his voice unwavering. "And I'm not the only one in this room who knows it." As Musk's words sank in, the shockwaves rippled through the courtroom. What did he mean by CIA's top man? Was this part of his defense strategy, or was there something far deeper at play? Musk leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he addressed the room once again. "You think I built all of this, Tesla, SpaceX, everything on my own? You're wrong. I've been playing a much bigger game." The reporters, once so eager to capture his fall from grace, now found themselves riveted by the sudden shift in narrative. What game was Musk talking about? What had he been hiding all these years? And more importantly, why reveal it now, in the middle of a fraud trial? The room was buzzing with questions, but Musk wasn't done. "If you think this trial is about money and numbers, you've missed the point entirely. This is about something far more dangerous, something that could change the world forever." The words hung in the air like a challenge, daring anyone in that room to ask the questions they were all too afraid to voice. And as Musk turned and made his way back to his seat, the entire courtroom was left to grapple with the most startling question of all. Was Musk truly the genius entrepreneur they had thought him to be? Or was he something far more dangerous and far more powerful than anyone could have ever imagined? What if the man you thought you knew, the one who built revolutionary companies, wasn't who you thought he was at all? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Elon Musk had always been different. From an early age, he stood out, not just because of his extraordinary intelligence, but because of the way he approached the world. While other kids were playing outside or watching TV, young Elon was buried in books, teaching himself programming and reading science fiction novels that painted bold visions of the future. By the time he was in his teens, Musk had already mastered the art of entrepreneurship, selling a homemade computer game for $500. He had no way of knowing it then, but that small victory was the first step toward a legacy that would eventually stretch across the stars. But Tesla wasn't just about building cars. It was about creating a sustainable future. Musk's focus on battery technology, renewable energy, and self-driving vehicles painted a picture of a world that could exist without fossil fuels. This vision, though ambitious, was one of the key reasons why Musk gained such a devoted following. But it wasn't enough for Musk to just change the way people drove. He had his sights set on something much larger, literally. SpaceX, the space exploration company he founded in 2002, aimed to make space travel affordable and ultimately establish a human colony on Mars. The goal seemed outlandish to most, but Musk's belief in the possibility of human space colonization was unwavering. The early days of SpaceX were a roller coaster of failure and success. There were 3 consecutive rocket failures, each one more costly than the last, but Musk refused to give up. He poured nearly every penny he had left into the company, and finally, on the 4th attempt, SpaceX succeeded in launching the Falcon 1 into orbit, a feat that made Musk the first person to privately fund a rocket to space. The success of SpaceX would ultimately redefine the future of space exploration. Musk's vision of reusable rockets and low-cost space travel not only changed NASA's approach to space, but also sparked a new space race among private companies. Through SpaceX, Musk's ambitions didn't just touch the Earth. They reached beyond it, challenging humanity's very concept of what was possible. Behind the tech mogul, the billionaire entrepreneur, and the visionary innovator, however, there was a side of Elon Musk that the public didn't often see. The personal cost of his relentless drive for success had been immense. His first marriage to Justine Wilson, a fellow Canadian, ended in divorce after several years. His second marriage to actress Tallulah Riley was similarly tumultuous, ending in a high-profile split. Musk's obsession with work often took precedence over his personal life, and his relationships suffered because of it. But Musk didn't dwell on his personal failures for long. Instead, he channeled his frustrations into his work. His relentless pursuit of his goals was fueled by a belief that if he could change the world, it would be worth any sacrifice. Yet, despite all his public triumphs, there was always a part of Musk that felt misunderstood. His focus on the future sometimes overshadowed the present. He was a man whose dreams were too big for the world to grasp, and who believed that the price of greatness was not just financial, but personal. But as Musk stood in the courtroom now, facing the fraud charges that had the world's eyes on him, there was a sense that something much larger was at play. Was the world ready for the truth about him? Did they understand what he had sacrificed, not just for his companies but for a larger, more secretive cause? Growing up in Pretoria, South Africa, Elon had a complicated relationship with his father. Elon Musk, his father, was a brilliant engineer but a distant, often harsh man. The strained father-son dynamic left Elon with a sense of abandonment, and he found solace in his own ambitions. While his father pushed him toward engineering, Elon was drawn to the idea of changing the world, not just through invention, but through thinking in ways no one else had considered before. He moved to Canada at 17, determined to escape the shadow of his father and forge his own path. From there, he made his way to the University of Pennsylvania, where he studied economics and physics. It was at Penn that Musk began to take his first big steps toward building the future he dreamed of. Despite the academic rigor, it was his unrelenting obsession with technology that set him apart. While other students were focused on their studies, Musk spent his free time developing ideas that would eventually become groundbreaking companies. One of his earliest ambitions was to make the world's first truly useful electric car, a goal that seemed far-fetched to most at the time but was rooted in his belief that technology could both save and revolutionize the world. Musk's early career trajectory was a whirlwind. After dropping out of Stanford University after just 2 days to pursue his entrepreneurial dreams, he co-founded Zip2, an online city guide software company. The company was sold for nearly $300 million, and Musk used his earnings to launch his next venture, X.com, an online payment company that would later become PayPal. PayPal's success made Musk a millionaire, then a billionaire, by his late 20s. But it wasn't just the money that drove him. It was the challenge, the drive to take on the impossible. He was always looking ahead, far beyond the next business deal or the next paycheck. The dream of transforming the world through clean energy, space exploration, and artificial intelligence consumed him. Then came Tesla and SpaceX. When Musk first set his sights on the electric car market, many dismissed the idea as unrealistic. After all, electric vehicles were not exactly popular back in the early 2000s. The concept of creating a high-performance, luxury electric car was a pipe dream, or so it seemed. But Musk saw it differently. He didn't just want to build an electric car. He wanted to change the world's relationship with energy. Musk wasn't content with simply making a product. He was determined to make something that could alter the course of history. Tesla was his vision of the future, where sustainable energy wasn't just a niche but the foundation of everyday life. Despite financial struggles and early failures, Musk's persistence and genius led to the creation of the Model S, a luxury sedan that proved electric cars could outperform traditional gasoline-powered vehicles. At first, Musk had been hesitant, his ego refusing to admit that he could be just another pawn in someone else's game. He wasn't a soldier. He was an entrepreneur. But the offer was too tempting. They wanted to leverage his tech. His companies could become instruments of national security, advancing U.S. interests under the cover of innovation. The CIA had long known that technology would shape the future, and that the right player could manipulate it to control far more than just markets. Musk was initially reluctant, even skeptical. But as his career soared, so did the stakes. The CIA knew that Musk's companies had the potential to change the world, not just through electric cars and space exploration, but through technology that could alter global power structures. Artificial intelligence, autonomous weaponry, renewable energy. These weren't just tools of business, they were weapons in the right hands. It wasn't long before Musk found himself tangled in a world of covert operations, classified missions, and moral dilemmas that would test everything he stood for. The line between good and evil had begun to blur, and Musk's role was far more significant than he'd ever imagined. The dream of a cleaner world, of a sustainable future, had become intertwined with the darker elements of geopolitics and national security. Musk wasn't just battling the prosecution in the courtroom. Behind the scenes, there were enemies who wanted to ensure that he wouldn't win, not just in the trial, but in whatever mission he had set in motion. There were whispers that not everyone in the CIA was happy with Musk's methods. A faction within the agency had begun to view him as a liability, someone who was getting too big, too powerful. Musk was a visionary, yes, but he was also dangerous. The mission was no longer just about serving the government. It was about controlling the world's most influential technologies, from clean energy to space exploration. And as Musk's influence grew, so did the threat to those who had once controlled him. One such enemy was Michael Weber, a high-ranking CIA operative who had been watching Musk for years. Weber was the kind of man who didn't trust anyone who strayed too far from the agency's control. He had been instrumental in shaping many of the covert operations Musk had unwittingly become part of. But Weber saw Musk's open defiance in the courtroom as a breach of the unspoken rules they had followed. As the trial progressed, Musk could feel the weight of Weber's presence. His adversary was watching from the shadows, manipulating things behind the scenes. The more Musk revealed in the courtroom, the more Weber's faction would work to undermine him. Musk's mind raced as he sat in the courtroom, trying to stay focused. He wasn't just fighting for his freedom. He was fighting for something much bigger, a vision that could either save or destroy the future. Every word he spoke, every revelation he made, could alter the course of history. As the proceedings continued, Elon Musk wasn't just the man who revolutionized technology and space exploration. In this courtroom, he was about to reveal a side of himself that the world had never seen. A side that would shake the very foundation of everything they thought they knew about him. The courtroom had never felt more electric. Whispers filled the air, the murmur of disbelief spreading like wildfire. Elon Musk's admission that he was a top operative for the CIA was something the world had never expected. No one had connected the genius behind Tesla and SpaceX with the shadowy world of espionage, let alone the CIA. Was it possible? Was the world's most public entrepreneur also the most covert? Outside the courtroom, the media frenzy escalated. News outlets scrambled to piece together a narrative they could understand. Headlines flashed across the internet. Elon Musk, CIA agent? Tesla CEO turned CIA operative in courtroom shocker. But Musk wasn't interested in the sensational headlines. No, this was far from just a courtroom spectacle. His mind was focused on something else, the battle that was about to unfold. As the trial dragged on, Musk knew that revealing his CIA ties wasn't a mere defense strategy. It was part of a larger plan, one that had been in motion long before this moment. He had never intended for the public to know the full extent of his involvement with the agency. The world was not ready for the truth. But now, with his back against the wall, he had no choice but to expose what had been hidden in the shadows for so long. Musk had always believed that his success was a result of his visionary thinking, but the reality was far more complicated. While he had revolutionized industries, there were powerful forces working behind the scenes to guide his path. Forces that had their own agendas and their own reasons for pushing Musk into the limelight. It all began years ago, during the early days of Tesla. Musk had been approached by a CIA recruiter under the guise of a private government contractor. At first, it seemed like a chance encounter, just another meeting with some influential figure in the tech world. But the recruiter had made it clear that Musk's talents, his intellect, and his vision weren't just of interest to Silicon Valley. They had caught the attention of the U.S. government. But the stakes were growing higher. The more Musk tried to unveil the truth, the more resistance he faced, not just from the court, but from unseen forces within the CIA itself. As he stood up to speak again, the tension in the air was palpable. There was no turning back now. "I know I've said a lot today," Musk said, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "But you need to understand, this trial is only the surface. There's something far more dangerous going on. And if you don't start paying attention, it won't just be me who's in danger. The future of the world is at stake." The jury remained silent. The judge gave him a skeptical look. The prosecutor seemed to hesitate, unsure whether to press forward with the case or to back off. "I've been a part of something bigger than any of you can comprehend," Musk continued. "And if you think this trial is just about fraud, if you think I'm just some greedy billionaire, then you've missed the point. The truth is much darker, and I have no choice but to expose it now." Musk's words sent a chill through the room. His revelation had set off a series of reactions. The prosecutor, now visibly nervous, exchanged glances with the judge, clearly unsure how to proceed. Some in the courtroom seemed to believe him, while others dismissed him as a man trying to escape conviction with a wild defense. But in the silence that followed, Musk could feel the walls closing in. There were bigger forces at work now, ones that he couldn't control. If he didn't act quickly, the chance to expose the truth would slip away. In the dark corners of the courtroom, a phone vibrated. A message popped up on Musk's screen, a single line of text. "They know you're about to blow the lid off everything. Move fast." Musk knew who had sent it, and he knew it was time to make his next move. The tension in the courtroom was palpable, like a wire stretched to its breaking point. Elon Musk had dropped a bombshell. He was not just an entrepreneur, but a CIA operative. And with every passing moment, the stakes continued to rise. What had started as a simple fraud trial had morphed into something much bigger, something far more dangerous. As Musk sat back in his chair, he could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on him, each person trying to decipher whether he was telling the truth or simply spinning a tale to escape punishment. His words hung in the air, and for a moment, the usual buzz of the courtroom fell into an eerie silence. But Musk wasn't concerned about the people who doubted him. His thoughts were elsewhere. The message he had received moments earlier was clear. Something had changed. There were those who knew exactly what he was about to reveal, and they were already making their move. He could feel it. This was no longer just a battle in the courtroom. This was a war, and he was at the center of it. Musk's mind wandered back to the early days of his covert involvement with the CIA. Back then, it had all seemed so simple. The agency had come to him with a proposition. Use your companies, your influence, and your technologies for the greater good. Musk had agreed, at least initially, not fully realizing how deep the rabbit hole would go. At first, the collaboration seemed harmless. The CIA had been interested in Tesla's cutting-edge battery technology, SpaceX's space capabilities, and his work on AI. Musk had signed the deals, not knowing the full scope of what he was getting involved in. He had become a cog in a much larger machine, a machine that controlled much more than the tech industry. His work with Tesla had played a pivotal role in advancing sustainable energy, but behind the scenes, it had also been helping to build energy grids that could be controlled, even weaponized. SpaceX's reusable rockets, which the public saw as a leap forward for space exploration, were, in reality, a critical part of an expansive military project to dominate space. Musk had often wondered if he was making a mistake by getting involved. But he believed in the mission, the idea that humanity could transcend its earthly limitations. That belief had kept him going through sleepless nights and dangerous situations. But now, as he sat in the courtroom, those same beliefs were being tested in a way he had never imagined. As the trial continued, Musk could feel the unseen hand of the CIA tightening around him. They had always been there, lurking in the background, making sure that his operations were in line with their interests. But now, something was different. It was clear that the agency was no longer willing to let Musk control the narrative. The court case was just the beginning. Musk's lawyers had been telling him that the prosecution had found new evidence, more damning than anything before. But Musk wasn't worried about the charges. He was worried about the real battle, the one he was about to fight on a much larger scale. The message had been a warning. The CIA faction that had been supporting him was no longer in control. There was another faction, one with much more power, and they were moving quickly to silence him. They had been watching him for years, and now they were ready to take him down. Elon's mind raced as he sat in the courtroom, trying to make sense of the situation. His future wasn't just about clearing his name in court. It was about surviving what came next. His only hope was to move quickly, to reveal the truth before those pulling the strings behind the scenes could shut him down. He had to act fast. He had to make the first move. The trial had been a game of chess from the start, but now Musk was certain that the real game wasn't being played in the courtroom. The real battle was being fought in the shadows, behind the closed doors of government agencies, powerful corporations, and shadowy operatives who had their own agenda. Musk knew that to survive this, he would need to take control of the narrative. The truth had to come out, no matter the cost. But as he looked around the courtroom, he realized that he couldn't do it alone. He needed allies. And those allies were far more unlikely than anyone could have imagined. Just as the judge called for a brief recess, Musk's phone buzzed again. It was another encrypted message, but this time, the sender wasn't who he had expected. The message read, "I know what you're up against. Meet me tonight. I have a way out." Musk's heart skipped a beat. The cryptic message didn't come from his usual network. It came from someone else, someone with a deep knowledge of the CIA's inner workings. He had no choice. He had to take the risk. As the recess ended and Musk stood to return to his seat, he knew that things had just escalated beyond what he had planned. The wheels were in motion now. His next move would determine everything. Later that night, Musk met his mysterious contact in a dimly lit cafe, far from the public eye. The man across the table was older, his face lined with years of experience in the kind of world Musk had been thrust into. The stranger spoke in hushed tones, his voice betraying a calm confidence. "I'm not going to sugarcoat this," the man began. "You're walking into a storm. The CIA has made its move. The faction you've been working with is losing control, and you're in their sights. If you want to survive this, you need to move quickly." Musk leaned forward, his mind racing. "What's your connection to all this?" "I'm someone who knows how the system works," the man replied, his eyes narrowing. "And I've been watching you for a long time. You're more important than you think, Musk. The game you're playing isn't just about cars and rockets. It's about shaping the future of global power." Musk nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of the man's words. "Then what do I need to do?" The man slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents, secret plans, dossiers, and maps. Musk's eyes widened as he skimmed the pages. This was more than just corporate espionage. This was about control over global energy, space, and even AI. "You have to take down the system from the inside," the man said. "Expose the truth before they silence you. The clock is ticking." Musk's pulse quickened. He had been playing a game of technology and innovation, But now it seemed that the real game was one of survival. The world he had entered, the world of covert operations and power plays, was far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. His vision for a better future was now entangled in a web of secrecy and manipulation. But he wasn't backing down. The choice was clear now. It was time to reveal everything, the truth that could either save or destroy the future. But Musk also knew that with this revelation would come consequences. Those who controlled the game wouldn't let him walk away unscathed. The days that followed the meeting in the cafe felt like a blur. Elon Musk knew his life would never be the same. The documents in the folder were his key to exposing the truth, his truth. But that truth was far more complicated and dangerous than he ever could have imagined. He wasn't just an entrepreneur anymore. He was at the epicenter of a global conspiracy, and the clock was ticking. In the courtroom, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. The judge's eyes had narrowed, and the prosecution seemed to be growing more desperate with every passing moment. They had never expected Musk to fight back like this. The CIA's intervention had made everything even more uncertain. Musk wasn't just defending himself against accusations of fraud. He was fighting for his survival. Each passing day in the trial felt like a fight for air. The walls were closing in. But the message Musk had received from his mysterious contact echoed in his mind. Expose the truth before they silence you. Every word made sense. His companies had been used as pawns in a much larger game. The battle for control over technology, energy, and space was no longer just a battle of ideas. It was a battle for global dominance. And Elon Musk was caught right in the middle. Musk had always prided himself on being a visionary, a man who saw the world differently. But now, those visions were clouded by the weight of the secrets he had carried for so long. For years, he had built his companies with the belief that he was changing the world for the better, creating sustainable energy, revolutionizing space travel, and advancing artificial intelligence. But now he realized that his dream had been manipulated. The CIA's involvement in his companies had been far-reaching. His work at Tesla had not only advanced electric vehicles, but had also contributed to global energy networks that were in the hands of powerful government agencies. SpaceX's rockets had been used not just for space exploration, but to test military technologies that could change the course of warfare. His work on AI wasn't just for self-driving cars, it was being used to develop autonomous weapons. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. Everything he had worked for, everything he had sacrificed, had been shaped by forces beyond his control. And now, those forces were coming for him. The courtroom was packed as the trial entered its most crucial phase. The air was thick with tension as Musk's lawyer stood up to make a final statement. But Elon couldn't focus on the legal arguments anymore. His mind was consumed with the truth he was about to reveal, the truth that could either save or destroy everything. He could feel his heartbeat in his chest as the judge turned toward him. "Mr. Musk," the judge said, her voice stern but measured, "you've made some extraordinary claims in this trial. It's time for you to tell us the truth. What is it you were trying to say?" The room was silent, every eye on him. This was it, the moment where everything changed. Musk stood slowly, his heart racing. For years, he had been trying to protect the world from the very thing he was about to expose. But now, he had no choice. The truth had to come out, no matter the consequences. "I'm not just the CEO of Tesla and SpaceX," Musk began, his voice low but clear. "I'm not just an entrepreneur. I've been a part of something much bigger for a long time. A secret, a dangerous game that has been played behind the scenes, with all of you in the dark." The crowd shifted uneasily, unsure of what to expect next. "I've worked with the CIA," Musk continued. "They approached me years ago, long before anyone knew my name. They wanted my technology, my ideas. They wanted control over the future. They wanted control over energy, space, and artificial intelligence. I didn't see it at first. I thought I was just helping to create a better world." He paused, taking a deep breath. This was the moment that would define him. There was no going back now. But I was wrong. They didn't want a better world. They wanted power. And I was just a pawn in their game. The room was dead silent. The truth had been laid bare, and it felt like the ground beneath Musk's feet had shifted. What had once seemed like a battle for his freedom now felt like a fight for something much larger. something that could change the world forever. The prosecutor stood frozen, unsure of how to respond. The jury, too, seemed stunned. The entire courtroom had been thrown into disarray. But Musk wasn't finished. "I've seen the way the system works," he said, his voice growing stronger. "I've seen how they manipulate technology to shape the future, and I can't stay silent anymore. The truth is too important." The emotional weight of his words was palpable. For the first time, Musk allowed himself to fully feel the gravity of the situation. He wasn't just fighting for his companies, for his reputation. He was fighting for the future of humanity. The truth was bigger than anything he had ever imagined. The stakes had never been higher. The most surprising part of the aftermath was Michael Weber's sudden shift. Musk had always seen him as an adversary, someone who had been part of the system, working behind the scenes to manipulate the truth. But now, Weber had offered his support, claiming that there were factions within the CIA who wanted the truth to come out. It was hard for Musk to trust him, but there was no denying that the stakes were too high. He needed allies, even if they came from unexpected places. As Weber led Musk through the complex web of the CIA's inner workings, Musk realized just how deep the rabbit hole went. The agency had been manipulating not just his companies but global events, using everything from space missions to artificial intelligence as part of their covert operations. The very technologies that Musk had pioneered were being used as weapons in the ongoing power struggle between global superpowers. But even as Musk began to uncover more about the CIA's operations, the danger was far from over. The faction within the CIA that still wanted to control Musk's companies had begun to take more direct action. Musk's life was being threatened from all sides, by people within the very organization he had once worked with, and by enemies who wanted to silence him before he could reveal any more. In the dead of night, as Musk sat in his home, reviewing the documents Weber had given him, his phone buzzed with a message from an anonymous number. "They know what you're planning. You're a target now. Move fast." Musk's heart raced. He had no idea who had sent the message, but he knew it was serious. He couldn't trust anyone anymore, not even his closest allies. Every step he took now had to be calculated. Every move had to be made with extreme caution. He turned to Weber, who had been working tirelessly with him to gather evidence and plan their next steps. "What do we do now?" Musk asked, his voice steady but filled with urgency. Weber paused for a moment, then looked Musk in the eyes. "We go public. We expose everything. The people deserve to know what's really been happening. But we need to be smart. If we don't, they'll take us down before we can even finish." The decision to go public was a gamble, but Musk knew there was no other choice. He couldn't hide from the truth anymore, and the world needed to see it. With Weber's help, Musk began releasing key pieces of evidence, documents, video footage, and testimonies that proved the CIA's involvement in his companies. The world was stunned as the story unfolded, and the media frenzy only intensified. As the courtroom buzzed with shock and confusion, something unexpected happened. A figure in the back of the room stood up, and Musk's heart skipped a beat. It was someone he never thought he would see here, someone he never expected to side with him. Michael Weber, the CIA operative Musk had known all too well, stepped forward. The room fell even quieter. "You're right, Musk," Weber said, his voice calm but firm. "Everything you've said is true. But there's more to this story than you realize. You've been used, but you're not the only one." Musk stared at Weber, stunned. This wasn't the man he had expected to walk into the courtroom. But here he was, an ally in the unlikeliest of places. "I'm here to help you," Weber continued. "The faction you've been working with is crumbling. But there are others who want the truth to come out. We need to take control of this together." For the first time in a long time, Musk felt a flicker of hope. He wasn't alone in this fight. There were others. Others who understood the stakes, others who knew how to bring down the system from the inside. Musk looked around the courtroom, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. The path ahead was uncertain. The fight was just beginning, and the challenges would be immense. But he knew one thing for sure. The truth was out, and there was no going back. The future was in his hands now, and he was ready to take on whatever came next. The revelation in the courtroom had set off a chain of events that no one could have predicted. Elon Musk had dropped the truth like a bombshell. His companies, his innovations, and his very existence in the public eye had all been shaped by the CIA. The shockwaves from his confession reverberated through the media, the government, and the public, leaving a trail of confusion and disbelief. But as the days went by, one thing became crystal clear. This was far from over. The truth had come out, but the forces that had long controlled the narrative were not about to sit back and let Musk walk away unscathed. The world was watching, but behind the scenes, the real battle was just beginning. Elon Musk knew that he wasn't fighting just for himself anymore. The moment he stepped into that courtroom and revealed the truth, he had become the face of a much larger war. A war for control over the future of humanity. The CIA, the government, powerful corporations, and shadowy figures were all moving in the background, each with their own agenda. Musk had exposed one layer of the truth, but there was still so much more to uncover. But the public's reaction was far from one-sided. While some hailed Musk as a hero, a man brave enough to expose the darkest corners of the global power structure, others condemned him as a traitor. Conspiracy theories swirled, and some even accused him of being part of a larger scheme to destabilize the global order. Musk's life, once a tale of innovation and success, was now a subject of global debate. He found himself at the center of a storm, the weight of his decision pressing down on him every waking moment. Amid the chaos, Musk found himself reflecting on everything that had led him here. The choices he had made, the risks he had taken, and the cost of his ambition. For so long, he had believed that his innovations could save the world, that by pushing the boundaries of technology, he could create a future free of fossil fuels, a future where humanity could thrive beyond Earth. But now, those same innovations had been used to manipulate the very world he had hoped to change. The realization hit him hard. He wasn't just fighting for his reputation anymore. He was fighting for the future. The truth he had revealed wasn't just about the CIA. It was about a system of power and control that extended far beyond any one organization. If Musk wanted to change the world, he would have to go further than he ever had before. He had to dismantle the systems that had been manipulating humanity for generations. As he stared at the documents in front of him, the full weight of his mission began to settle in. It wasn't just about clearing his name or protecting his companies. It was about creating a new world order, one where the power of technology was used for the benefit of all, not for the control of a select few. Musk knew that his next steps would be even more dangerous. The CIA, the government, and the corporations that had been pulling the strings behind the scenes wouldn't let him go easily. They would do everything in their power to silence him, to make sure that their grip on the future remained unchallenged. But Musk was no stranger to danger. He had faced obstacles before, massive challenges that seemed insurmountable. He had revolutionized entire industries. And now, he was about to take on the biggest challenge of all, dismantling the system that had controlled humanity for so long. The road ahead was uncertain, but Musk knew one thing. He couldn't turn back. The fight for the future had just begun, and he was ready to lead it. In the weeks that followed, Musk began to notice something disturbing: silence. The government, once so eager to prosecute him, seemed to have pulled back. The media, too, had started to tone down their coverage. It was as though the very people who had orchestrated his rise were now distancing themselves from him, as though waiting for him to implode on his own. Musk knew better than to think that the silence meant they had lost interest. In fact, he suspected it meant just the opposite. The powers that be were simply recalibrating, figuring out how to deal with the storm he had unleashed. He wasn't naive. He understood how the game worked. The real conflict wasn't going to play out in the courtroom or in the headlines. It was going to happen behind the scenes, in the shadows where the most powerful forces in the world could pull strings with no one the wiser. One evening, as Musk sat in his office, reviewing a pile of encrypted messages from his remaining allies, there was a knock at the door. It was late, later than he usually kept office hours. He wasn't expecting anyone, especially not anyone who would come bearing good news. When the door creaked open, he was surprised to see Michael Weber standing in the doorway. The man who had once been a CIA operative was now his most trusted ally. "I think we've got a problem," Weber said, his tone clipped. He stepped into the room and shut the door behind him, lowering his voice. Musk raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "We've got eyes on us," Weber said, scanning the room quickly. Not just the usual government agents. This is bigger. A third party is watching your every move. Someone who wants to ensure that your revelations don't go any further. Musk leaned forward. Who? Weber hesitated before speaking again. It's not just the CIA anymore. There are other players in the game, corporations, shadow governments, and even rogue states. They've all got their fingers in the pie. They've been using your work for years, and they'll do anything to keep that power intact. Musk's heart raced. He had suspected that his revelations would attract more than just attention from the CIA. But to hear that this conflict had escalated beyond just one organization was alarming. Weber continued, his eyes narrowing. The silence we've been hearing? It's not because they're giving up. It's because they're regrouping, figuring out how to deal with you. They don't want to destroy you outright. They need you alive. You're valuable to them. But they also can't afford for you to keep speaking out. Musk processed the words. He had already seen firsthand how the CIA manipulated his companies, and he knew the lengths they were willing to go to keep their secrets safe. But now he realized that this wasn't just a matter of government overreach. It was a global conspiracy that spanned beyond borders. Then what do we do? Musk asked. We build our own network. We need to gather more allies, people who understand what's at stake and who aren't afraid to stand up to the powers that be. We need to go underground, keep our movements off the radar. We need to make sure that when the next step comes, we're ready. Musk thought for a moment. You think I can trust anyone outside our circle? Weber gave a wry smile. Trust is a luxury right now, Musk. But there are always people willing to fight for the truth. We just have to find them. As the days passed, Musk began to feel the full weight of what he had stepped into. Every decision was now a high-stakes gamble. He wasn't just trying to survive a court case. He was fighting to bring down an entire system of power and manipulation that had its hands in everything from tech to government to global finance. The truth had been exposed, but now the real work began. Musk had to navigate a dangerous game of cat and mouse, where every move he made could bring him one step closer to either victory or destruction. As he looked at the encrypted messages, he could see that there were others out there. Others who had been watching his every move, waiting for the right moment to reach out. Some were former allies, others were complete strangers, but they all shared one thing in common. They wanted the truth exposed. Musk's own team, the few who hadn't abandoned him, began reaching out to their network of contacts. Slowly, a resistance was forming. It wasn't large, not yet, but it was growing. The people who had worked with Musk in the past, engineers, scientists, former CIA operatives, journalists, began to come out of hiding, offering their help in whatever way they could. But as the network grew, so did the danger. The shadowy forces that controlled the global system were not going to let Musk dismantle their empire without a fight. And Musk knew that soon, the world would know the full extent of what had been happening in the dark corners of power. But there was still a long road ahead, and the obstacles were greater than ever. I've been watching you for a while, Ava said, her voice calm yet urgent as they spoke over an encrypted video call. What you're doing is dangerous, but it's necessary. The people you've exposed don't care about the consequences. They'll stop at nothing to keep their grip on the world. But I've got resources you can use. I can help you fight back. Musk was skeptical. He had trusted few people in his life, and Ava's sudden offer of help seemed too good to be true. But there was something about her that seemed genuine. She had lived through the same system he was now fighting against, and if anyone knew how to take it down, it was her. Why now? Musk asked. Why reach out after everything that's happened? Ava paused before answering. Because I realized you're right. This fight isn't just yours anymore. It's everyone's. And if we don't act now, it'll be too late. I've already seen the way they plan to use technology to manipulate and control entire populations. If you want to change things, you need more than just documents. You need to rally those who've been left behind. You need to give them a voice. Musk sat back in his chair, processing her words. This wasn't just about him anymore. It never had been. It was about fighting for the future of humanity. As Ava's resources helped Musk gain more ground, he began to realize the magnitude of the fight he was involved in. The deeper he dug, the more he uncovered. The conspiracy was vast, spanning governments, corporations, and clandestine organizations that worked in the shadows to control the very future of human progress. Musk's own companies had become battlegrounds in this war for control. Tesla, SpaceX, Neuralink, these weren't just innovative companies anymore. They were tools in a larger, much more dangerous game. The AI, the space missions, the electric cars, they were all part of the same plan, a plan that Musk had unwittingly helped build. But the stakes had never been clearer. The powerful forces behind the scenes weren't just trying to maintain control, they were working towards something much darker. They wanted to harness technology not to improve humanity, but to dominate it. And the more Musk learned, the more he realized that he couldn't just expose the truth. He had to fight back against it. One evening, as Musk prepared for another media appearance to discuss his findings, he received a devastating blow. Ava's information had uncovered something he hadn't expected, a covert operation to sabotage his companies from within. There were people close to him, trusted allies, who had been compromised. Musk's heart sank as he read through the evidence. Some of the people he had worked with for years were secretly aligned with the forces he had been fighting against. For a moment, Musk felt like the ground had been ripped out from under him. This wasn't just a battle against anonymous enemies in the shadows. It was a battle against the very people he had trusted, the ones who had helped him build his empire. But then something inside him snapped. This wasn't the time to give up. It was the time to fight harder than ever. He called Ava. "We've got to act now," he said, his voice filled with renewed determination. "We expose everything, and we take them down. It's time to stop playing their game. We change the rules." Ava's voice was steady. "You're right. We go all in. But we need to be smart. Every move we make from here on out will determine the outcome." Musk and Ava devised a plan. A final gambit that would bring the truth to light in a way that no one could ignore. It would involve releasing even more explosive documents, but this time, they would do it differently. Instead of letting the media control the narrative, they would bypass the system entirely, going directly to the people. They would use every tool at their disposal, social media, encrypted channels, and anonymous leaks, to ensure the truth couldn't be buried. But they both knew that this would put them directly in the crosshairs of the most powerful forces in the world. They weren't just exposing a few corrupt individuals anymore. They were challenging the entire system that had held power for generations. Musk felt a sense of clarity wash over him. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't worried about the fallout. He wasn't worried about his reputation, his companies, or his personal safety. This was bigger than all of that. He was fighting for the future, and nothing, not even the most powerful enemies, was going to stop him now. The days that followed Musk's decision to go all in were marked by a sense of urgency and tension. He knew that he was playing a dangerous game, one where every move mattered. The forces he was up against were vast, and the risks were higher than ever. But with Ava Larson at his side, Musk felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was no longer just about exposing corruption. It was about fundamentally shifting the balance of power. Musk's plan to bypass traditional media channels was unconventional, but it was genius. He had learned long ago that the truth could be manipulated by the media, twisted and buried beneath layers of corporate and governmental agendas. If he wanted to be heard, he needed to go directly to the people. Using encrypted platforms, anonymous accounts, and a network of trusted allies, Musk and Ava began to flood the world with the truth. They released a series of bombshell documents, interviews, and videos that detailed the CIA's manipulation of global events, the corporate collaboration and the exploitation of technology, and the deep ties between powerful governments and organizations in shaping the future of humanity. Musk paced back and forth in his office, wrestling with his options. He could keep releasing more of the classified documents, more of the damning evidence that would destroy the people behind the curtain, but he knew that doing so would escalate the conflict, and soon, the risks would outweigh the rewards. Instead, he began to rethink his strategy. He would go after the very core of the system. If the conspiracy was this entrenched, then Musk realized that he couldn't just expose it. He had to dismantle it piece by piece, starting with the corporate structures, the organizations, and the governments that had been working together in the shadows. Musk was determined to change the game entirely. He wasn't just going to expose the corruption. He was going to take it down, from the inside out, and to do that, He needed a new kind of weapon, the truth. The world had taken a sharp turn into chaos. Musk's revelation that the CIA, corporations, and even rogue governments were working together to control global technological advancements had shaken the very foundation of modern society. While some cheered him on as a whistleblower, others called him a destabilizing force, a man who had exposed too much, too soon. But what most people didn't know was that Musk had only scratched the surface. The truth he had revealed was just the beginning. As Musk continued his campaign to bring the truth to light, the pressure increased. His every move was under surveillance, and it wasn't just the CIA watching him anymore. He had become a target for much more powerful enemies, enemies with far-reaching influence, resources, and the ability to disappear without a trace. One night, as Musk sat alone in his study, a message flashed across his encrypted device. It was from an unknown contact. "You're playing a dangerous game, Musk. You think you've seen the true power? You've barely touched it. If you continue this path, you'll find out what happens when people like us are crossed." Musk froze. He recognized the tone. Cold, calculated, and threatening. This wasn't just any enemy. It was a message from someone high up, someone who had the means to make him disappear without anyone ever knowing he was gone. Musk could feel the danger creeping closer, but he wasn't going to back down. He was already in too deep. As the threats piled up, something unexpected happened. A new ally reached out to Musk, someone he hadn't anticipated. It was Eva Larson, a former high-ranking executive at one of the most powerful tech companies in the world. Eva had once been an insider, working with the same global forces that Musk had exposed, but after witnessing the manipulation and corruption firsthand, she had walked away. Now, she was offering Musk her help. The first leak was small but impactful, an interview with a former CIA agent who confirmed Musk's claims about the agency's influence over his companies. It was just the beginning, but the reaction was swift. Within hours, the media began to pick up on it. By the end of the week, the world was abuzz with the implications of the leaks. Musk's name was trending worldwide, but it wasn't the usual tech mogul headlines. This time, he was being called a revolutionary, an insider turned whistleblower, and the public was divided into factions, each with their own view of what he had uncovered. But the true power of the leaks was still to come. Musk and Eva knew that they had to be careful. The shadowy forces they were challenging would stop at nothing to protect their secrets, and Musk's efforts had already drawn the attention of some of the most dangerous people in the world. They weren't just targeting his companies anymore. They were targeting Musk himself. One morning, as Musk was going over the next phase of their plan, he received a cryptic message from a new contact, someone who claimed to have inside knowledge of the global conspiracy. "You're playing their game. They're going to make you disappear, just like the others. You think you're untouchable, but they know how to silence people like you. Keep pushing, and you'll see what happens when the truth is too much for them to handle." Musk's blood ran cold as he read the message. It wasn't just a threat, it was a warning, and one that Musk knew he couldn't ignore. The closer he got to revealing the full extent of the conspiracy, the more dangerous it became. Eva, ever the strategist, urged him to take extra precautions. "We need to keep moving forward, but we also need to protect ourselves. If they're coming after us, we have to be ready. We can't afford to be careless." Musk agreed. The clock was ticking, and they had to stay one step ahead. Despite the increasing threats, the leaks continued, each one more explosive than the last. The CIA's role in shaping global technology, the covert manipulation of markets, and the use of Musk's own companies as pawns in a global power struggle, all of it was laid bare for the world to see. And yet, amidst the chaos, Musk found himself reflecting on something bigger than just the fight at hand. The truth was out, yes, but what came next? What would the world look like if the power structures he had exposed were dismantled? He realized that the journey he had embarked on wasn't just about exposing corruption. It was about creating a new world. A world where power wasn't concentrated in the hands of a few. A world where technology could be used for the benefit of all, not for manipulation. He could see it now. A future where humanity worked together to solve its most pressing issues, where space exploration wasn't about dominance, but about unity. A future where AI was used to enhance life, not control it. Musk wasn't just fighting for the truth. He was fighting for a new paradigm, a new vision for the future. And that vision had to be shared with the world. With every new leak, the world's attention shifted more and more toward Musk. Governments scrambled to contain the fallout. The media was in a frenzy, covering every new revelation with increasing urgency. It became clear that the public wasn't going to let this go quietly. The demand for accountability grew louder with each passing day. But with that attention came an inevitable consequence. Musk knew that his enemies weren't going to let him walk away from this. They couldn't afford for him to succeed. Late one night, as Musk sat in his office, reviewing the next round of documents set to be released, a knock echoed through the door. He didn't have to ask who it was. He knew. It was Ava. "Something's wrong," she said, her face pale as she stepped into the room. "We've been compromised. They found us." Musk's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "They know everything," Ava replied, her voice tight. "They've traced our communications. We've been infiltrated. They're coming for us." Musk felt a surge of adrenaline. This wasn't a drill. This wasn't a warning. This was the real deal. He had known the risks when he started this, but now the stakes were higher than ever. The next few hours were a blur of frantic planning, encrypted communications, and hasty evacuations. Musk's life, once a carefully curated image of success, was now a race against time. They had played the game of shadows for too long. Now, it was time to confront the darkness head-on. As the tension mounted and the truth spread like wildfire, Musk was forced to make an impossible choice. The government, the corporations, and the hidden hands pulling the strings were closing in. They would do whatever it took to silence him, to put the genie back in the bottle. Ava had one last piece of advice for him. "You can't keep playing by their rules, Musk. You have to go further. Expose them all, not just the CIA. They need to know who they're really up against." Musk knew what she meant. The only way to truly win this fight was to confront the shadowy forces at the top, those who controlled the narratives, the technologies, and the destinies of millions. With a final, decisive move, Musk prepared to release the last piece of the puzzle. The true architects behind the conspiracy, the ones who had orchestrated everything from the very beginning. And with that, Musk's war for the truth would reach its climax. The fight for humanity's future was about to enter its final phase. The final pieces of the puzzle had been set into place. Elon Musk stood at the precipice of an outcome that could reshape the entire world, or lead to his utter destruction. Everything he had worked for, every risk he had taken, had brought him to this moment. With the last of the explosive leaks ready for release, Musk knew that the fight he was about to wage wasn't just against shadowy operatives or global corporations. It was against a system that had controlled the world for centuries. It had been days since Ava had delivered the unsettling news. They had been compromised. The powers that were after them had the resources to track every move, every communication. But Musk didn't flinch. He had made up his mind. The truth could no longer be hidden. The world needed to know who was really pulling the strings behind the global events, the technology, and the manipulation of governments. The final leak, one Musk had kept locked away for the longest time, was now ready. It contained names. Not just the CIA, not just rogue corporations, but the very individuals who had orchestrated decades of control and manipulation over governments, industries, and the public. The elite who controlled the flow of information, technology, and, ultimately, power itself. Ava sat beside him, her face a mixture of determination and fear. "This is it. Once we hit send, there's no turning back. We're all in." Musk didn't hesitate. He hit the button. The documents flooded the dark web, encrypted channels, and independent media outlets. The truth was now in the public domain. It wasn't just another leak. This was the culmination of everything he had exposed. A series of interconnected forces that controlled the world from the shadows. Names of powerful individuals, members of secret councils, and board members of transnational corporations that secretly ran the global tech industry and intelligence operations were now out there. Musk had done it. The veil was lifted. The impact was immediate. News agencies, independent journalists, and social media exploded with the revelations. The world was in shock, grappling with the scale of what had just been uncovered. For hours, there was chaos. Riots, protests, heated debates. People were demanding answers, accountability, and justice. The implications of Musk's leaks hit governments, the tech industry, and intelligence agencies like a tsunami. Political leaders scrambled to distance themselves from the revelations. The corporate titans whose names had been exposed went into hiding, their empires now under siege. But even amidst the upheaval, Musk knew that the battle was far from over. The powerful forces that had been exposed weren't going to take this sitting down. They had lost control of the narrative, but they still held the keys to immense power. It didn't take long for Musk to realize that the forces he had exposed were going to fight back harder than ever. Within hours of the leak, the government issued a statement. Musk was labeled a traitor, dangerous disruptor, who was putting national security at risk. Lawsuits began to pile up, and the media, once jubilant about his revelations, started to flip the narrative. They painted Musk as the villain, a man who had endangered countless lives for his own benefit. The backlash was swift and brutal. Government agencies moved to freeze his assets, cut off funding to his companies, and apply pressure from every angle. Even SpaceX, Musk's crown jewel, was targeted, with international governments threatening to sever contracts and partnerships. But Musk wasn't backing down. In the past, he had been a man who bent the rules to his advantage, but now he had become a symbol of resistance, one that the world was watching. The more they attacked him, the more his supporters rallied. It was clear that he had touched a nerve. Ava, who had been helping orchestrate the leaks and coordinate the digital war, was busy organizing the next phase. "We can't just sit back and wait for them to retaliate," she said. "We need to take this global. The people are with us now. They need a leader, and that's you." Musk nodded, his mind racing. It's time to shift the paradigm. If the governments and corporations won't change, then we will. In the days following the leak, Musk's focus shifted. He knew that while the world was in chaos, this wasn't the time to remain reactive. He needed to take action, to build a new world order, one where technology wasn't controlled by the few, but shared by the many. To do this, Musk would need to leverage every resource, every ally, and every network that had been part of his life. He began working with Ava and his trusted circle to plan the next steps: global movements, new decentralized technologies, and the creation of open-source platforms that would allow people everywhere to innovate freely without the influence of monopolistic corporations or secret governments. The leaks had opened a Pandora's box, but now, Musk was going to lead the charge in rebuilding what had been broken. But the deeper Musk went into this new mission, the clearer it became that there was still one more battle to fight: the battle for control of the narrative. The elites who had been exposed in the leaks weren't going to disappear quietly. They were powerful, and they had connections everywhere. It became a game of who would control the narrative, and Musk wasn't alone in this fight. As governments moved to try and censor the leaks, Musk's global network fought back, creating decentralized networks and encrypted platforms where the truth could continue to spread. In this final confrontation, Musk realized that the fight wasn't just about defeating the system. It was about fundamentally changing the way the world worked. It wasn't about exposing a few bad actors. It was about ensuring that this never happened again. He stood before the press, cameras flashing as he prepared to make one final statement. This wasn't just a press conference. It was a declaration of war against the very structures of power that had sought to control humanity. "The truth is no longer hidden," Musk said, his voice steady but resolute. "What we've exposed today is only the beginning. This is a new world, a world where information is free, where technology is used for the benefit of all, not for control. The people have spoken, and we will not be silenced." Musk's words resonated around the globe, and for the first time, the people saw a glimmer of hope. His fight was far from over, but the tides were shifting. The global elite, once so secure in their power, were now facing a new world. A world where the truth could no longer be hidden in the shadows. As the world looked on, Musk knew that the battle for the future was just beginning. But this time, he wasn't fighting alone. With Ava, his allies, and millions of supporters around the world, the path ahead was clear. Together, they would reshape the world, starting with the foundations of power itself. The revolution had begun. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The world had shifted in an instant. What had started as a dangerous game of secrets and revelations had escalated into a full-scale war for the future of humanity. Elon Musk, once a visionary known for his groundbreaking innovations, had now become a symbol of resistance against a corrupt system that had ruled the world for far too long. But for every action, there was an equal and opposite reaction. The powers that had been exposed in Musk's leaks were no longer sitting idle. The global elite, once unchallenged in their control over technology, politics, and media, were mounting a counteroffensive. They weren't going to let Musk dismantle everything they had built without a fight. In the weeks that followed the global revelations, Musk found himself facing an unprecedented storm. His every move was scrutinized, and the media, once his ally in exposing corruption, had turned on him. Governments began to freeze his assets and restrict his access to critical resources. Tesla, SpaceX, and Neuralink, once untouchable empires, were now under siege. Lawsuits and smear campaigns flooded the news. But Musk wasn't alone. Ava, the former tech executive who had become his closest ally, was working tirelessly to help him navigate the storm. Together, they had begun to build a decentralized movement, one that would challenge the corporate monopolies and the secretive organizations Musk had exposed. They had the support of millions of people around the globe, ordinary citizens who saw the leaks as a call to arms, a way to reclaim their future. Still, the forces they were up against were formidable. Musk knew they couldn't rely on public sentiment alone. They needed to take the fight directly to the heart of the system that had once controlled them all. Ava had been working on something for weeks, a project that had the potential to level the playing field. It was a new platform, one that could bypass traditional systems of control. Built on blockchain technology, it was an open-source platform that would allow anyone to share information without fear of censorship. It wasn't just a social media platform. It was a new way to organize, to fight back, and to reclaim control from the corporate giants. "We have to move fast," Ava said one night as they sat together in Musk's private office. "The powers that be will try to take this down the moment we go live. We need to be ready for the inevitable counterattack." Musk nodded, feeling the weight of what they were about to do. This platform is going to change everything. Once it's out there, it's too late for them to stop it. But Ava wasn't just worried about the digital counteroffensive. "There's something else you need to understand. The elites aren't just going to fight back online. They have resources we can't even begin to imagine. Private armies, access to political power, and a network of loyalists everywhere. They've been preparing for this moment for years. If we're going to win, we need to be ready to strike back in ways we haven't even considered." Musk's expression hardened. "We'll be ready. We have to be." As the new platform went live, it became clear that the elites were taking drastic measures to contain the truth. Cyber attacks, blackmail, and even physical threats were used against Musk's allies. The media launched a full-scale smear campaign, labeling Musk as a dangerous lunatic, a man who had put the world's safety at risk. The CIA, whose involvement had been exposed, began to push back. They had been the first to mobilize a counterattack, pulling strings behind the scenes to destabilize Musk's businesses and discredit him further. But they weren't acting alone. The global corporations that had been revealed as puppeteers in Musk's leaks were now making their move. The true scale of the power he was up against became evident. It wasn't just about tech moguls and government officials. It was about a deep state network, a clandestine force that had infiltrated every corner of society. This was the force that had shaped history from behind the curtain, and they weren't about to let a man like Musk stand in their way. With the release of the new platform, Musk became a lightning rod for controversy. Every social media post, every encrypted message, and every leak added fuel to the fire. But as much as the world was watching, Musk realized that the real battle wasn't with public opinion. It was with the forces of control that lurked in the shadows. For every action Musk and Ava took, the counterforce struck back harder. Disinformation campaigns spread like wildfire, targeting their supporters, sowing doubt, and creating confusion. Governments and corporations banded together to shut down the platforms Musk had built, claiming national security risks, cyber threats, and even treason. But Musk wasn't going to be silenced. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for the future of the world. As Musk prepared for his next move, he knew that it wouldn't be enough to expose the system. They needed to dismantle it. They needed to create an alternative. Ava had a plan, one that involved a combination of guerrilla tactics and digital warfare. It would take everything they had, every resource, every ally, to succeed. And even then, the odds were stacked against them. The time had come for Musk to make his final move. It wasn't just about technology anymore. It was about control. He had to take back control of the narrative, the power, and the future of humanity. To do that, he would need to infiltrate the very systems that had once controlled him. With Ava's guidance, Musk organized a daring move, a massive leak of encrypted documents that would expose the full extent of the global power structure. But this time, he wasn't just releasing documents. He was going to hit them where it hurt, by revealing their deepest secrets, the networks they thought were untouchable. The documents would include everything: the deals, the alliances, the covert operations that had been used to control the world. And this time, Musk wasn't just exposing the players. He was offering the world a chance to take back what had been stolen from them. As the countdown to release the final leak began, Musk and Ava knew that the consequences of this decision would be extreme. This would be their last chance to expose the truth, and once the floodgates opened, there would be no turning back. But Musk wasn't afraid anymore. He had been to the brink, seen the darkness, and come back with a singular vision: to change the world for good. As the world held its breath in anticipation, the final leak was ready to be unleashed. Musk and Ava had meticulously prepared for this moment, knowing that the consequences would ripple through every layer of society. There was no turning back now. This was the culmination of everything Musk had worked for: a full-scale assault on the global system that had once controlled everything. The encrypted documents were uploaded to a secure, decentralized platform. Within seconds, they spread across the globe, touching every corner of the internet, bypassing the censorship, and exposing the deepest secrets of the world's most powerful organizations. The files contained undeniable evidence of corruption, manipulation, and covert operations that spanned decades. It wasn't just governments. It was corporations, tech giants, and shadowy elites who had controlled the flow of information, power, and wealth. The moment the leaks went live, the world erupted. Social media exploded with hashtags, messages of outrage, and calls for justice. News outlets scrambled to cover the breaking news, some attempting to downplay the scale of the revelations. But the truth was too powerful to be contained. It was too late. The world was awake. The global elite didn't take long to respond. Within hours, the financial markets had begun to spiral. Stocks of major corporations tied to the exposed conspiracy plummeted. Governments, too, were in disarray, as investigations began to flood in from all directions. The media was no longer just reporting the leaks. They were scrambling to find out how deep the rabbit hole really went. Yet, despite the chaos, there was a sense of unity emerging from the ashes. For the first time in decades, people from all walks of life were coming together. It was no longer about Musk or Ava. It was about the truth. And the truth was undeniable. The system that had ruled over the world for so long was crumbling. Musk stood at the center of it all. It was surreal. What had once been a shadowy conspiracy theory was now an undeniable reality. The public was in uproar, the governments were paralyzed, and the corporations were being forced to account for their actions. But despite the storm, Musk remained calm. This was the moment he had been working toward. The battle for humanity's future had begun, and it was clear that the old world was coming to an end. As the chaos unfolded, Musk found a rare moment of quiet. He stood by the window of his office, watching as the world around him seemed to shift. The revolution he had ignited was no longer just about dismantling corrupt systems. It was about giving the world a chance to rebuild itself, to start anew. Ava joined him, her face lit by the glow of her phone as she watched the flood of reactions pouring in. "It's happening," she said softly. "The world is waking up." Musk nodded, his mind racing. "This is only the beginning, Ava. The truth is out, but now we need to make sure it sticks. We need to build something better, something that can't be co-opted." Ava smiled, but it was a tired smile. "We're not done yet. The real work starts now." As the leaks continued to send shockwaves through the global power structure, Musk found himself facing a new challenge: the backlash. The powerful organizations he had exposed weren't going to simply fade into the background. They had too much power, too many resources, and too much influence. It was clear that they would stop at nothing to silence Musk and those who had helped him. But Musk wasn't backing down. He had the people on his side, and the leaks had shown them the truth. Governments were scrambling, but the global movement he had sparked wasn't going to be easy to suppress. Musk and Ava continued to lead the charge, calling for accountability, transparency, and the dismantling of the global networks that had been built to oppress. In the coming weeks, massive protests erupted worldwide. People were demanding change. The streets were filled with the voices of ordinary citizens, workers, students, activists, who were finally ready to take control of their future. The revolution was no longer just Musk's battle. It was a global movement, and the momentum was unstoppable. The elite were losing their grip on power, but they weren't going to go down without a fight. Behind closed doors, they began to organize their counterattack. It wasn't just about media manipulation or economic pressure anymore. They were willing to go further. They had the means, the connections, and the power to do anything necessary to maintain control. Musk knew that this would be their last stand. As the counterforce began to mobilize, he and Ava worked tirelessly to ensure their message could not be suppressed. They fortified their decentralized platforms, creating encrypted channels for people to share information, organize, and fight back against the looming threat. But Musk also understood something deeper. The system the elites had built wasn't just about holding power. It was about controlling the future. If they were to succeed, Musk would need to not only dismantle the current order but also ensure that nothing like it could ever rise again. As the battle between the old power and the new resistance intensified, Musk began to focus on what would come after the dust settled. The future was not just about exposing the truth. It was about rebuilding the world from the ground up. The decentralized platform he and Ava had built was only the beginning. Musk envisioned a new society, one where technology was used for the benefit of all, not just the few. It wasn't just about space exploration anymore. It wasn't even about artificial intelligence. The future Musk was building was about empowering individuals, giving them the tools and the freedom to shape their own lives. "We're not just building technology," Musk said one night, sitting across from Ava. "We're building a new world, one that doesn't belong to the elites. A world where people are free." Ava leaned back in her chair. "It's a long road ahead, but we've made the first step." The battle for the future was far from over. But for the first time in history, the world had a chance to reshape itself. The old guard was crumbling, and the truth had taken on a life of its own. Musk and Ava knew that the road ahead would be difficult. There would be more fights, more sacrifices. But the spark had been lit. The world was no longer under the control of those who had sought to manipulate it. A new era had begun. The power to change the world was in the hands of the people, and there was no going back. The dust from the leaks was still settling, but the global upheaval that followed had already shifted the course of history. The revolution Musk had started was now a movement of millions, and every day, more people joined the cause. It wasn't just about exposing the corrupt powers. It was about taking control of the future, ensuring that this new world would be shaped by the people, not the elite. As the resistance swelled, Musk knew that their victory wouldn't come easily. The fight was intensifying, and the forces arrayed against them were growing stronger. But something had changed in the air. People were no longer afraid. They were united by one common cause: to tear down the old world and rebuild something better. And Musk, despite the growing danger, was determined to lead them. Musk and Ava were not working alone. The decentralized platform they had created was growing rapidly, spreading across borders, languages, and ideologies. What had started as a small initiative had turned into a global network of activists, hackers, whistleblowers, and citizens all working together to expose corruption, share information, and organize for a new future. The reach of their movement was vast. Nothing could stop the flow of knowledge once the floodgates had been opened. But the real strength of the network was its ability to adapt. As governments scrambled to censor the leaks and shut down the decentralized platforms, new technologies and methods were developed to bypass the barriers. The people had found ways to stay ahead of the curve. Together, they were an unstoppable force. "We can't just let the elites control the narrative anymore," Ava said one evening as they reviewed their progress. "We need to build a network that works for the people, not just the powers that be. We're not just fighting back, we're creating the future." Musk nodded. "The old guard never wanted us to have this kind of power. But now we've got the tools, and we're using them." As the movement gained momentum, Musk realized they needed more than just a digital platform to succeed. They needed allies, people with power, influence, and resources who could help tip the balance in their favor. They weren't looking for corporate sponsors or government support. What they needed were individuals and organizations that shared their vision, who were ready to risk everything to create a new world. Musk had connections with some of the most powerful people in the world, but now he needed to leverage those connections for the right cause. Some were willing to join him, seeing the leaks as a golden opportunity to break free from the control of the global elite. Others, however, remained cautious, too afraid to risk their positions. But Musk wasn't one to wait for permission. He and Ava set their sights on a new kind of alliance, one that spanned across industries and sectors, from grassroots organizations to rogue technologists, from activists to former intelligence operatives. It was time for the people who had been oppressed to come together and forge a new future. The movement continued to spread like wildfire. As more people joined, they were organizing in new ways. Musk's influence was undeniable, but it was the people on the ground, ordinary citizens in cities, towns, and villages across the globe, who were driving the change. The resistance wasn't just a top-down operation. It was a bottom-up revolution. As the revolution reached its peak, Musk found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. He had started out as a dreamer, a visionary who wanted to make life multiplanetary, to push humanity beyond the limits of Earth. But now, his mission had changed. It was no longer just about space. It was about people, about the future of humanity itself. "We've done something incredible," Musk said to Ava one evening, as they watched the waves of protesters take to the streets. "But the real work begins now. We've broken the system, but we need to rebuild it." Ava smiled, a look of determination in her eyes. "Together, we will." This isn't just about the next generation of technology. It's about the next generation of people. Musk looked out the window, a sense of peace settling over him. The world was changing, and for the first time, he truly believed that a better future was within reach. The revolution was now undeniable. Musk and Ava had fought tooth and nail to expose the truth, and the world had responded in kind. The global elite, who had once held all the power in the world, were no longer untouchable. Every secret they tried to bury was now laid bare for the world to see, and the people were demanding change. But while the elites were on the defensive, Musk knew that the final battle wasn't over. The enemy may have been weakened, but they were far from defeated. The stakes had never been higher. The global stage had been set for a final confrontation, one that would determine the future of humanity itself. Though the global elite had been exposed, their grip on power was still formidable. Behind the scenes, a quiet battle was unfolding. The corporations, governments, and secretive organizations that had ruled the world for centuries were now facing their greatest threat yet. A decentralized, united force of ordinary people who had finally realized their collective strength. Yet the elites weren't going to surrender without a fight. They had resources, connections, and military forces at their disposal, and they had no intention of going down quietly. Musk and Ava knew that to truly dismantle the old system, they needed to push forward, force the elites into a corner from which they could not escape. But they couldn't do it alone. The resistance had gained substantial momentum, but the remaining power of the elites was like a dark cloud hanging over everything they had built. Every day, new reports came in of protests, sit-ins, strikes, and acts of civil disobedience. The global elite, once so powerful, were now reeling. They had underestimated the power of the people, thinking that they could control the narrative, buy off the dissenters, or crush the resistance through force. But they hadn't counted on the unity and determination of a world that was tired of being controlled. And even in the face of overwhelming odds, the resistance was winning. The elites were fighting back with everything they had, manipulating media, engaging in covert operations, and pushing the limits of power. But it wasn't enough. The momentum was too strong. Musk and Ava knew that they couldn't stop now. The elites had been exposed, but they still held significant power. The resistance needed to push forward and take the fight to the heart of the system. The corporate giants, the government agencies, the intelligence networks, they needed to force them to relinquish their grip on the future. The next phase of the plan was set in motion. A series of high-profile, coordinated operations designed to disrupt the global networks that had once controlled the flow of information and resources. This was the moment when Musk would put everything on the line, knowing that failure could mean the end of the revolution. But success would mean the dawn of a new era. While the movement continued to gain traction on the surface, Musk and his allies knew that the real battle was being fought in the shadows. Covert operations were taking place every day. Hacking attempts, disinformation campaigns, and attempts to destabilize governments that had shown any inclination to support the people's revolution. The elites were throwing everything they had at the resistance, desperate to maintain control. Musk and Ava weren't just relying on the power of the people anymore. They had built a network of cybersecurity experts, former military operatives, and whistleblowers who were working behind the scenes to expose the elites' every move. With the aid of these new allies, they began to infiltrate the very systems the elites used to maintain their power: corporate boardrooms, government offices, and even the deep web. Every day, new secrets were revealed, new weaknesses were exposed, and the elites' grip on the world grew weaker. The shadow war was underway, and Musk was determined to win. Musk's mission had always been to expose the elite for what they truly were: a cabal of individuals who sought to control the world for their benefit, regardless of the cost to humanity. But the more he uncovered, the more he realized just how deep the rot went. The elites were not a monolithic group. They were interconnected with global networks of influence, operating in secret, pulling strings from the shadows. Musk and Ava spent months gathering intelligence. They needed to know who was truly behind the scenes, the puppet masters who had manipulated governments, orchestrated wars, and controlled economies for their own gain. It wasn't just about the big names in Silicon Valley or Wall Street. It was the hidden figures, spooks, oligarchs, and shadowy financiers who wielded their power unseen. Through their underground network, Musk and Ava uncovered the names and locations of some of the most influential members of the elite. Some of them were part of secret societies, while others operated in the background, never stepping into the public eye. But now, their identities were known, and their secrets were ready to be exposed. Musk stood in his private office, staring out at the city below. Ava entered quietly, holding a tablet with the latest intel. "It's happening," she said, her voice steady but tinged with the weight of what they were about to do. Musk turned to her, determination in his eyes. "We have to finish this. They won't stop until they've erased everything we've built. This is our chance." The final phase of their plan was set. They would launch a coordinated operation to target the elites where it would hurt the most: their wealth, their power, and their public image. It wasn't just about taking them down. It was about exposing them for what they truly were, so the world would never forget. Musk's team had infiltrated every corner of the elite's empire. Financial systems were hacked. Hidden bank accounts were exposed. Shady political donations were revealed. For the first time in history, the elites would be held accountable, not by courts or governments, but by the very people they had tried to control for so long. As the final operation was set into motion, the world held its breath. News outlets were abuzz with reports of financial instability, political chaos, and mass protests. Musk's platform had become the epicenter of global unrest, with millions of people demanding justice and accountability. The elites had no idea what was coming. Behind closed doors, the elite leaders were scrambling to contain the fallout. They called in their private security forces, they attempted to discredit Musk, and they tried to shut down the resistance's communications. But the truth was out. People knew what they had done. The illusion of power that had kept them in control for so long was crumbling, piece by piece. Musk knew this would be the moment of reckoning. The elites could either face the truth and step down, or they could double down and fight back with everything they had. The showdown was inevitable. Musk and Ava had prepared for every eventuality. Their resistance network was stronger than ever, but so was the pushback from the elite. Intelligence operatives, mercenaries, and loyalist forces were mobilizing, ready to quash the uprising at any cost. It all came to a head in a final, high-stakes confrontation. Musk was summoned to a meeting with the most powerful leaders of the elite, those who still had the power to shape the future. The venue was a private, heavily secured location, hidden from the public eye. Musk knew it was a trap, but he walked in unarmed, with nothing but his resolve and his truth. The elites tried to pressure him, offering bribes, deals, and assurances of safety if he would just back down. But Musk wasn't buying it. He had seen the cost of their power, the lives destroyed in their quest for control. He knew that there was no compromise with those who had built their empires on the backs of the oppressed. "I've seen what you've done," Musk said, his voice unwavering, "and I won't stop until the truth is out. You had your time. Now, it's ours." The elites laughed, but the fear was palpable. They knew that Musk wasn't just some eccentric billionaire. He was the voice of millions, people who had been pushed to the brink and were no longer afraid to fight back. As the showdown unfolded, Musk's allies worked behind the scenes to execute the final phase of their plan. The elite's financial networks were crumbling, their media influence unraveling, and their power was fading. One by one, the key figures who had once controlled the world were brought to justice, either arrested or forced into hiding. But the true victory wasn't in the downfall of the elites. It was in the awakening of the people. The revolution had become a movement of empowerment. A movement that wasn't just about tearing down the old system, but about rebuilding the future on a foundation of truth, transparency, and equality. Musk and Ava stood at the center of it all. They had won, not by taking down the powerful, but by showing the world that change was possible. The world had been forever altered, and the fight for the future was just beginning. The world had changed. The elites, once so powerful, were now disbanded or exiled, their empires in ruins. The people had risen up, dismantling the old system that had long oppressed them. But the victory, while monumental, was only the beginning. Now, Musk and Ava faced the daunting task of rebuilding what had been destroyed, and this time, they had to build it right. As the dust from the conflict began to settle, Musk took a deep breath. The streets were calmer, the protests had turned into celebrations, but the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on his shoulders. It wasn't enough to tear down the old world. They needed to create something new, something better. In the aftermath of the revolution, the world needed leadership. There was no going back to the way things were, but there were countless questions about what the future should look like. Governments had collapsed, economies had shifted, and the global infrastructure was in chaos. The people were hungry for change, but they didn't know what that change should look like. Musk and Ava realized that the key to success lay in establishing a new foundation, a decentralized world that wasn't just about technology, but about empowering the individuals who would make up the new society. They couldn't just build a system that mimicked the old one, no matter how well-intentioned. They had to create something that would give every person an equal say in their future, a chance to truly shape the world around them. To do that, they started by creating a global council made up of everyday citizens, each selected through a transparent and democratic process. This council would guide the transition to a new world order, one that prioritized the needs of the people, not the interests of the powerful few. Musk was cautious, though. This new system needed to be resilient, free from the corruption and manipulation that had plagued the old world. It needed safeguards that would ensure power was never concentrated in the hands of a few again. One of the first initiatives was to build a decentralized global economy, an economy that didn't rely on the traditional banking systems or multinational corporations. This meant that digital currencies and blockchain technologies became central to the new world's financial systems. The goal was clear: to make financial systems more accessible, transparent, and equitable. But the economy wasn't the only area in need of reform. The world's political systems had been built around centralized power. Leaders, politicians, and institutions had been corrupted over time, and it was time for something radically different. The Global Council that Musk and Ava had helped create would oversee the creation of new democratic structures, systems where decisions were made collaboratively and where power wasn't concentrated in the hands of a few people. At the same time, Musk knew that the technological revolution had to be part of this new world order. The key to making this society sustainable and just was leveraging technology to empower people, not control them. New advancements in AI, renewable energy, and space exploration would help pave the way for a future that was self-sustaining and forward-thinking. Ava, with her background in social activism, worked tirelessly to ensure that the changes Musk was making would be felt by the people on the ground. She focused on education, healthcare, and community building, ensuring that no one would be left behind as the world evolved. It wasn't just about technology. It was about building a world where everyone had the chance to thrive. As the first few months passed, something incredible began to happen. People were taking ownership of their future in ways they never had before. With the Global Council guiding them, communities around the world were rebuilding. Local economies were thriving in ways that they hadn't for decades. Small businesses, once stifled by the global elite, were now flourishing in a system that valued collaboration over competition. Education, once a commodity only available to the privileged, was now accessible to everyone. Through decentralized platforms and open-source education systems, people in every corner of the world were able to learn, grow, and contribute in meaningful ways. Healthcare was another area that saw dramatic improvement. With the influence of corporations and pharmaceutical companies gone, healthcare was no longer a business. It was a basic human right. New technologies were helping to bring medical care to remote areas, and the focus shifted from profit to well-being. And in a way that Musk had never imagined, people were beginning to believe in themselves again. There was a sense of optimism in the air, a belief that they could shape their world, not just endure it. The new world was a reflection of their collective will, and it was more than they had ever hoped for. Despite the newfound sense of hope, there were still forces within the system that were trying to hold on to power. Not all the elites had been exposed, and some of the old guard remained active in the shadows. They were working hard to undermine the progress Musk and Ava had made, attempting to infiltrate the new systems and pull the strings behind the scenes. Musk and Ava knew that the battle was far from over. While they had dismantled the structures that had once controlled the world, they now had to defend the progress they had made. This meant not only securing the systems they had built, but ensuring that the people remained vigilant, keeping the decentralized systems transparent and accountable. Months passed, and the world continued to evolve. The new order, though fragile, was slowly taking root. Musk and Ava could see the tangible changes in the world around them: clean energy systems replacing fossil fuels, cities transforming into sustainable, tech-driven hubs, and a renewed sense of purpose and community in people's lives. "We've come so far," Ava said one night as she sat with Musk, watching the stars outside his window. "But this is just the beginning. The future we're building is one we've always dreamed of, but it's going to take time. It's not enough to change the system. We need to change the mindset of the people." Musk nodded, looking out at the horizon. The revolution wasn't just about taking down the elites. It was about showing the world what's possible. If we can build this new future together, there's nothing we can't do. As the first successes of the new order became more apparent, Musk began to turn his attention once more to the stars. Space exploration had always been his dream, and now, with the world on a more sustainable path, it was time to take humanity's next step: colonizing other planets. The journey that had begun with the promise of a better life on Earth was now ready to extend beyond it. Musk had always believed that humanity's destiny was among the stars, and now, with a more equitable world at his back, the dream of Mars and beyond was closer than ever. But for now, there was still work to be done. The revolution had not only given humanity a chance at a new future, it had sparked a new era of possibility. And this time, it wasn't about power. It was about people. With the world still recovering from the monumental shift Musk and Ava had instigated, the focus began to shift toward the stars. Earth had been radically transformed. The old systems were broken, and humanity was embracing a new age of possibility. But Elon Musk's vision had always gone beyond the confines of Earth. The promise of space exploration, once a distant dream, now seemed within reach. It was time to push forward with the next great frontier: the colonization of Mars and beyond. Musk, standing at the helm of a reformed SpaceX, had never been more determined. He knew that humanity's future depended not just on fixing the broken systems of Earth, but on ensuring that humanity could survive beyond its home planet. The revolution had sparked a sense of unity and possibility among people, and Musk believed that the next step was crucial: to ensure that humanity, united and empowered, would become a multi-planetary species. For years, Musk had poured his heart and soul into SpaceX, developing the technology that would eventually take humanity to Mars. But the old world's priorities had always put space exploration on the back burner, while the elites focused on consolidating their power. Now, with the old guard out of the picture and a new, empowered generation in charge, the mission was clear. Get to Mars and take the lessons of Earth's revolution with them. Ava, who had been instrumental in reshaping the world's political and economic systems, now turned her focus toward the task of interplanetary governance. She had a vision of a world not ruled by corporations, but by the people. A world that could be applied to not just Earth, but to any future colonies. Musk knew that while they had changed Earth's fate, they had to start thinking about humanity's future as a whole. What's next? Ava asked one morning as she met Musk in his newly constructed office, overlooking the bustling city of New Hope, what the world was now calling the reborn Earth. The stars, Musk replied, with a determined glint in his eye. Mars isn't just a destination. It's a new beginning. Musk's vision for Mars was simple but ambitious. He didn't want to just send a few astronauts to the red planet. He wanted to build a thriving, self-sustaining colony. The goal was clear: make humanity a multi-planetary species, spread the values of decentralization and collective empowerment, and use the lessons learned on Earth to build a better world. To do this, Musk and his team had to overcome some of the most significant technical and logistical challenges in history. The first step was to establish a permanent, habitable base on Mars. SpaceX had already launched several successful missions to Mars, sending rovers, probes, and cargo supplies, but the true test would be sending the first humans. SpaceX had developed the Starship, a spacecraft capable of carrying large crews and cargo over the vast distance between Earth and Mars. The technology was cutting edge, and it had the potential to change everything. But even with all the advancements in technology, the challenges of life on Mars were immense. The planet was cold, hostile, and barren. Musk knew that only by creating a fully sustainable infrastructure, using resources from the planet itself, could humanity survive there. The first colony will be small, but it'll be the foundation, Musk explained to Ava, standing before a holographic map of Mars. We can't just build a base. We have to create a sustainable ecosystem. Power, water, food, everything. Ava nodded. And we'll need a new governance system, one that works on Mars. This can't just be Earth's old way of doing things. Musk agreed. That's the real opportunity. Show the world and Mars that governance can be decentralized. We don't need power to be concentrated in a few hands. We need to let the people decide. The world was watching. For the first time in history, a truly global effort was underway to colonize another planet. Governments, corporations, and private citizens alike had rallied behind Musk's vision. The Global Council, which had guided Earth's rebirth, was now tasked with helping to oversee the Mars project, ensuring that it reflected the values of transparency, sustainability, and equality. Musk had always been a proponent of the power of collaboration, and now, as he prepared to launch the Mars Initiative, he was bringing together the brightest minds from all over the world. Scientists, engineers, designers, and even philosophers, all united with one goal: to create a new society, one that was better than the last. The first mission was scheduled to depart in 3 years, but the groundwork was already being laid. The Mars Initiative would not just be a scientific endeavor. It would be a social experiment, a chance to prove that humanity could live differently, both on Earth and beyond. As Musk worked tirelessly on the technological side of the Mars project, Ava focused on shaping the new social structures that would govern it. She knew that this new society had to be different from what had come before. Less about power, more about collaboration. For her, the key was decentralization. Each colony on Mars would have the power to govern itself, but still remain connected to the greater vision of a united human species. The goal is not just to survive on Mars, Ava told Musk one evening, her voice soft but resolute. It's to thrive, to create something that works for everyone, not just the few. Musk nodded, understanding. Exactly. This is our chance to do it right. We won't make the mistakes we made here. As the launch date for the first crewed mission to Mars drew closer, excitement reached a fever pitch. The team of astronauts was selected, a diverse group of men and women from various countries, chosen not just for their technical expertise, but for their shared vision of what the Martian colony could become. The first SpaceX ship, called Pioneer, was ready to depart. It was a historic moment, one that would mark the beginning of humanity's greatest adventure. As the ship launched from Earth's atmosphere, the entire world watched, a collective breath held in anticipation. For Musk and Ava, the moment was bittersweet. They had fought so long and hard to reach this point, and now, the future was in their hands. "Do you think they're ready?" Ava asked, watching the launch on a screen. Musk smiled faintly. "They are. And so are we. This is just the beginning." As the Pioneer traveled toward Mars, Musk and Ava began to think about the next phase. The first colony was only the start, and there were countless challenges ahead. But they had learned so much from the revolution on Earth, about resilience, collaboration, and the power of the people. Those lessons would guide them as they built a new society on a new world. "Look at what we've done," Ava said as she stood beside Musk, looking out at the stars. "We've not only changed Earth, we've changed the future." Musk's gaze was fixed on the stars ahead. The real journey is just beginning. The first few months after the Pioneer landed on Mars were a time of intense anticipation and hope. The entire world watched as the first humans set foot on a new planet. The media celebrated, and the Global Council hailed the mission as the dawn of a new era. But beneath the excitement lay the stark reality of what it meant to live on Mars, a place far less hospitable than Earth. While Musk and Ava had prepared for this moment, they quickly realized that the challenges were far greater than they had anticipated. The Martian colony, still in its infancy, was fragile. Every day was a battle for survival in an environment that seemed determined to resist human presence. The harsh conditions of the Red Planet were unforgiving, and every aspect of life had to be carefully managed to ensure that the colony would thrive. Mars was cold, too cold for humans to survive without advanced technology. The colony was built in a small, dome-like structure that provided protection from the harsh winds and freezing temperatures. Inside, the astronauts wore pressurized suits to keep themselves safe from the toxic atmosphere. One of the biggest challenges was creating a sustainable environment. While the team had set up solar panels to generate power, the amount of energy needed to keep the colony running was immense. Water had to be extracted from the Martian soil, which was a slow and delicate process. Food supplies were limited, and every crop that grew in the colony's hydroponic systems was precious. There was no room for waste, and every decision made could mean the difference between survival and failure. Musk's face often appeared on the screens of Earth, speaking to the public about the progress on Mars. He was optimistic, but even he couldn't hide the challenges they were facing. "We are building the future," Musk would say, "and like any great adventure, it will not come without its hurdles. But we will overcome them, together." As the months passed, tension began to build within the colony. The stresses of living in such a confined, hostile environment were beginning to take their toll on the astronauts. The close quarters, combined with the overwhelming responsibility of ensuring the colony's survival, caused friction among the crew members. Even the strongest bonds of camaraderie were tested. Commander Sarah Mason, the leader of the Mars mission, found herself at the center of these growing tensions. She was a brilliant strategist and a natural leader, but the weight of the mission was overwhelming. Every decision she made could impact the lives of everyone in the colony. The pressure to succeed was suffocating. Her second-in-command, Dr. Luca Reyes, a scientist with a calm demeanor, disagreed with some of Mason's decisions. He believed the crew was moving too quickly in certain areas, especially with the expansion of the colony. He argued that they needed to focus on sustainability, not growth. "We need to stop pretending everything is fine," Dr. Reyes argued during one of their daily meetings. "We're stretching our resources too thin. One mistake, and we could lose everything. This isn't just a mission. This is our future, and we need to think about survival." Commander Mason, visibly worn, shot back. "Survival isn't just about maintaining what we have. It's about moving forward. We can't afford to stop now. We have to grow. We have to push boundaries." Their disagreements, though respectful, echoed through the halls of the colony, creating an undercurrent of unease among the crew. The physical challenges of Mars were daunting, but it was the psychological strain that proved to be the most dangerous. Ava had always believed that Mars was an opportunity for humanity to start over, a chance to create something new, to escape the old cycles of power and corruption that had so dominated Earth. But as she watched the unfolding situation on Mars, a sense of doubt began to creep into her thoughts. She had stayed in close contact with the crew, regularly checking in and offering support. She listened to their concerns and tried to offer solutions, but she knew that this was not something that could be solved through words alone. The Martian colony was still too fragile, and the stakes were incredibly high. One evening, as Musk stood on the rooftop of the Martian Command Center, looking out over the barren landscape, Ava joined him. The wind on Mars was constant, but strangely still. "I didn't expect it to be this hard," she confessed quietly, her breath catching in the cold Martian air. Musk turned to face her, his expression tired but determined. "Neither did I. But we knew this would be a long road. There's no easy way to build something this important." Ava sighed, running a hand through her hair. "It's just we've come so far. But sometimes, it feels like everything is hanging by a thread. I'm afraid it might fall apart." Musk's gaze softened. "We've faced worse odds before. This is just another obstacle to overcome. And we'll do it together." A few weeks later, disaster struck. A solar flare, more powerful than any the colony had prepared for, caused a massive disruption in the colony's power supply. The solar panels that had been generating energy for the colony were severely damaged, leaving the crew with only a fraction of the power they needed to survive. For the first time since their arrival, the crew's survival was in real jeopardy. Without the power to sustain life support systems, the colony would quickly fall into disarray. Water filtration, oxygen generation, and communication with Earth were all at risk. Musk, though thousands of miles away, immediately began mobilizing resources. SpaceX's engineers worked around the clock to send a team to Mars with critical supplies and backup solar technology. But time was running out, and there were no guarantees. Back on Mars, Commander Mason had to make a critical decision. The crew could attempt to repair the solar panels, but the risk of failure was high. Or they could hunker down and conserve their limited resources, hoping for help from Earth. After consulting with Dr. Reyes and the rest of the crew, Mason made her choice. They would attempt the repairs, risky, but necessary. The crew worked tirelessly, using every bit of their ingenuity to try and get the power back on. After days of grueling work, the crew finally managed to restore enough power to stabilize the situation. The solar panels were functional again, and the worst of the crisis had passed. It was a small victory, but one that reminded them of their resilience. The event had been a wake-up call for everyone. Mars was not a place for complacency. It was unforgiving, and every day would require their best effort. The crew now understood that survival on Mars wasn't just about technology. It was about unity, resilience, and trust in one another. The crisis also brought a renewed sense of determination. It was no longer just about getting by. It was about thriving, building a new future, and proving that humanity could overcome any challenge, on Earth or on Mars. On the day the first shipment of supplies from Earth arrived, Musk addressed the colony from Earth via video call. The world was watching, and the crew's survival had become a symbol of hope for all of humanity. "Today, you've proven something extraordinary," Musk said, his voice steady but full of pride. "You've shown that no matter the obstacles, we are capable of overcoming them. The future isn't just about surviving, it's about thriving. And you've taken the first step." Ava, standing beside him, added, "This is just the beginning. We've faced our first test. But the real challenge now is to build something that lasts, not just on Mars, but everywhere. Let this be the foundation of a new chapter for humanity." The journey was far from over. The colony on Mars was fragile, but the spirit of humanity had never been more alive. And as the stars beckoned, there was no telling where this new chapter would take them. As the colony on Mars stabilized, the dream of a new beginning began to take shape. Musk's vision was clear. Mars was not just an extension of humanity's reach, but a blank canvas, a chance to create a new way of life. But even on the red planet, old questions arose. Who would lead? How would power be distributed? Could the lessons learned on Earth be applied to this new society? The philosophical debate on governance that had sparked Ava's vision for Earth now turned toward Mars. The stakes were high. The people on Mars were no longer just pioneers. They were the first to test a new form of governance that could shape the future of human civilization. Would they mirror the mistakes of the past, or could they build a truly decentralized society that worked for all? In the months following the colony's stabilization, the issue of leadership became increasingly important. With the initial phase of survival behind them, it was time to think about the future. But the leadership question was a difficult one that Musk and Ava had not fully anticipated. The crew, while still united in their shared purpose, was beginning to fracture under the weight of responsibility. Commander Sarah Mason, despite her strong leadership, had her doubts about her role in the long term. She had been the face of the Mars mission, but the pressure of governing a colony was unlike anything she had faced before. "We need more than just survival," Mason said in one of her meetings with Musk and Ava. "We need structure, but I don't know if I'm the right person to provide it long term. I've been a commander, not a governor." Ava, ever the visionary, disagreed. "You've led us through the hardest part. But now, we need to create a new system. A system where the people lead, not just one person or a few elites. We've seen what happens when power is concentrated in one place. We can't repeat that." Musk, who had long been an advocate for decentralization, nodded. "We need a new kind of government, one that allows everyone to have a voice, a system that works for the collective good, not for a few powerful individuals." But the question remained, how would they design this system on Mars? Ava proposed the idea of a decentralized council, with representatives elected from different sectors of the colony: engineering, agriculture, science, and even community development. Each sector would have an equal voice, and decisions would be made through consensus, not majority rule. She called it the Martian Collective. However, not everyone was convinced. Dr. Luca Reyes, the scientist who had been outspoken during the earlier crisis, argued that a purely decentralized system might lead to chaos, especially in times of crisis. "We need strong leadership. A council is all well and good, but we need someone with the authority to make tough decisions when lives are on the line." A heated debate ensued. Some crew members, especially those who had served in military roles on Earth, felt that a more traditional structure, a president or a prime minister, would be more effective. They argued that while Mars was a new world, the challenges they faced were still the same as those on Earth: scarcity, danger, and the need for quick, decisive action. Others, like Ava and Musk, were adamant that they could do things differently. "The point is not to avoid tough decisions," Musk argued. "It's to ensure that those decisions are made by everyone, not just a select few. This is a chance to do things right from the start." The debate raged on, but one thing was clear. Mars was not just a new frontier for exploration. It was a new frontier for human politics. The first test of the Martian Collective came sooner than anyone expected. The colony's power grid, while stable for the time being, was still vulnerable to unforeseen problems. One day, a malfunction in the primary oxygen generator caused a critical drop in the oxygen supply. The backup systems, while functional, were not enough to sustain the colony for long. The situation was dire. Commander Mason, who had initially favored a more centralized leadership model, was faced with a difficult decision. Should she take control and make the decision herself, or should she call the council together and risk further delay in solving the problem? Mason, after careful consideration, decided to call a council meeting. It was an unprecedented move, one that could either prove the viability of their new system or expose its flaws. The council convened in the central dome of the colony. Representatives from all sectors gathered, and the room was filled with tension. Everyone understood the gravity of the situation. "We have a crisis," Mason began, her voice steady but tense. "The oxygen supply is critically low. We need to decide on the best course of action. Time is not on our side." The council immediately began debating solutions. Some proposed that they focus all resources on repairing the generator, while others suggested that they evacuate the lower levels of the colony to buy more time. Each representative made their case, and the discussion quickly became heated. The first signs of division appeared when a new arrival, former military strategist Ethan Blackwood, began to gain influence. Blackwood had come to Mars with his own agenda. He believed that a strong, centralized government was necessary to protect the colony from external threats and ensure its long-term survival. We need discipline, structure, and leadership if we're going to make it on Mars, Blackwood argued at one of the colony's early council meetings. This isn't Earth. This is a new world, and we can't afford to operate under a system of debate and indecision. We need a strong hand to guide us. While Blackwood's argument was compelling, especially in light of the tensions surrounding the colony's growth, it struck fear into those who had worked so hard to build a system of shared governance. Sarah Mason, still struggling with the burden of leadership, was uncomfortable with Blackwood's approach. She had spent years building relationships with the other settlers, working to establish trust, and she feared that Blackwood's rhetoric would tear all of that down. But there was no denying that his ideas resonated with many of the settlers, especially those who had arrived on Mars with military or governmental backgrounds. The discussions on governance that had once been centered on cooperation and collective decision-making now started to take on a more aggressive tone. Musk had long believed that the success of the colony depended on cooperation and the willingness of all settlers to put the collective good ahead of personal gain. But Blackwood's growing influence was proving to be a formidable challenge to that vision. Musk, who had spent years building SpaceX and promoting the idea of a sustainable future on Mars, found himself questioning whether the idealism of the Martian collective was enough to hold the colony together in the face of growing internal conflicts. As the debates continued, tensions began to spill over. Proponents of the centralized leadership model, led by Blackwood, called for a special council to be formed, one that would give him the authority to make decisions for the entire colony. Blackwood argued that the colony's survival was too important to be left to a handful of unelected representatives. He promised to bring order and efficiency, to make Mars a place where everyone would have the opportunity to thrive. However, those who supported the Martian collective, including Ava, Sarah Mason, and many of the original crew members, saw Blackwood's approach as a threat to everything they had worked for. They argued that a single leader, no matter how well-intentioned, would inevitably become corrupt and out of touch with the needs of the people. "We've seen this before," Ava said during a heated debate in the council chambers. "Power concentrated in the hands of one person leads to disaster. We can't let that happen here." Mason watched, her nerves on edge, as the debate continued. The clock was ticking, and with every passing minute, the situation became more dire. Finally, Dr. Reyes, the scientist, spoke up. "We need to repair the generator, but we can't waste any more time arguing. We should divide into teams, each focusing on a different aspect of the repair. It's the only way we can get this done quickly." The council quickly voted to approve the plan. Teams were formed, and everyone went to work. The atmosphere was tense, but there was a sense of unity in the air. It was as if the colony had passed its first real test as a collective. By the end of the day, the oxygen supply had been restored, and the crisis was averted. The colony had survived, but the process had been far from easy. The decision to rely on the Martian collective instead of a single leader had been the right one, but it was also a reminder of how fragile their new system was. Mason, while proud of the colony's success, knew that the lessons of this crisis would shape their future. "We did it," she said to the council, "but there's a lot we still need to learn." Ava and Musk, watching from Earth, knew that this was just the beginning. The success of the Martian collective had proven that humanity could govern itself differently, but the real challenge lay ahead. As the colony expanded and more people arrived from Earth, the question of governance would only become more complicated. The people of Mars had made their first step toward building a new society, but there was still much work to be done. In the end, it was clear that the future of humanity on Mars would not just be defined by technology, it would be defined by the values they chose to uphold. As the Martian colony continued to grow, so did the tensions between those who supported the Martian collective and those who believed in more traditional forms of leadership. The success of the oxygen crisis was a turning point, but it also exposed the deep rifts that were starting to form among the settlers. Not everyone was on the same page, and the dream of building a utopian society on Mars was beginning to crack under the weight of personal ambition and differing ideologies. In the months following the oxygen crisis, the colony's expansion efforts ramped up. New settlers from Earth arrived, bringing with them their own hopes, fears, and ideas about how the colony should be run. While some saw Mars as a new beginning, a chance to leave behind the flaws of Earth's political systems, others were more inclined to bring their old ways of thinking with them. Musk and Ava, who had worked tirelessly to promote the vision of a decentralized, egalitarian society, found themselves facing mounting resistance. The colony's leadership, once united under a shared goal of survival and growth, was now split into factions. And as the stakes grew higher, the pressure to take control of the colony's future intensified. Blackwood, his eyes cold and focused, responded, "This isn't about power. This is about survival. If you want to keep playing games with committees and councils, fine. But when the next crisis hits, I'll be the one with a plan." The tension in the room was palpable. Each side believed they were right, and neither was willing to back down. As the debates intensified, Ava began to worry that Mars was becoming a microcosm of Earth's political divisions. She had envisioned Mars as a place where old-world politics would be left behind, but now it seemed inevitable that Mars would face the same challenges that had plagued Earth for centuries: power struggles, corruption, and inequality. Musk, ever the pragmatist, knew that the success of the colony depended not just on technological advancements, but on political stability. He understood that the growing conflict between the factions had the potential to tear the colony apart, and he was determined to prevent that from happening. But as the political landscape of Mars became more volatile, Musk also realized that he could not be both the visionary and the enforcer. He had to make a choice. Would he continue to champion the ideals of the Martian collective, or would he support Blackwood and the centralized leadership model? He spent days contemplating his options. The stakes were higher than ever before. The survival of the colony, the future of Mars, and the potential for humanity to thrive in space all hung in the balance. In a surprising turn of events, Musk announced that he would temporarily step back from the leadership role on Mars. "I believe that the future of Mars is in the hands of the people who live here," he said during a video address to the colony. "It's clear that we have reached a crossroads, and the decision of who will lead will determine the path forward." The announcement sent shockwaves through the colony. Musk had been the face of Mars from the very beginning. His vision, his ambition, and his drive had brought the colony to life. His decision to step aside was seen by some as a sign of weakness, while others saw it as a bold move to allow the settlers to choose their own future. "I will remain here, as a supporter of whichever system you choose," Musk continued. "But it is up to you, the settlers of Mars, to decide the type of society you want to build." With Musk's departure from the political scene, the council voted on whether to adopt a centralized leadership model, as advocated by Blackwood, or to continue with the Martian collective. The debate was fierce. The atmosphere was charged with emotion, and everyone knew that the outcome of this vote would shape the future of the colony. The stakes were high, too high for anyone to predict what the result would be. When the votes were finally counted, it was clear that Mars was on the brink of a significant shift. The centralized leadership model, led by Blackwood, had won by a narrow margin. The colony would be governed by a singular, strong leader, with Blackwood at the helm. For some, it was a victory. For others, it was the beginning of the end of the idealistic dream they had built. The future of Mars was now uncertain, and the path ahead was more unclear than ever before. The aftermath of the vote echoed through the colony like the tremors of an earthquake. Ethan Blackwood, now the undisputed leader of Mars, stood at the center of a new era, one that promised order, efficiency, and a singular vision. But beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to appear. The idealists who had built the foundation of the Martian colony, the ones who had dreamed of a new world free from the power struggles of Earth, watched with a mixture of fear and regret as the colony's future was placed in Blackwood's hands. At first, Blackwood's rise to power was marked by a series of pragmatic decisions. He oversaw the expansion of the colony's infrastructure, focusing on the efficient distribution of resources and the reinforcement of security measures. The colony was growing, and the people were responding to the certainty he provided. Under his leadership, there was no room for doubt, no room for debate. He was decisive, and that was exactly what Mars needed to survive. But as the weeks passed, it became clear that Blackwood's style of leadership was not as benevolent as it seemed. His obsession with control and order began to manifest in more authoritarian ways. The first signs of his growing power were subtle: a few changes in the way resources were allocated, a few key personnel shifts that seemed to concentrate authority in his hands. But soon, the shifts became more pronounced. Surveillance systems were expanded. Dissenters were quietly removed from positions of influence. And the council, once a body of collaborative governance, was now relegated to a shadow of its former self. Ava watched these changes with growing concern. The dream of a collective Mars, where decisions were made through consensus and shared responsibility, was slipping through her fingers. She had worked tirelessly to build a system where every voice was heard, but now, the council was little more than a rubber stamp for Blackwood's decisions. "We have to do something," Ava said to Sarah Mason, who had once been a strong advocate for the collective system. The two of them sat in a quiet corner of the colony's central hub, the hum of machinery and the chatter of workers filling the background. The colony's growth had been rapid, but with it came the tightening grip of Blackwood's rule. "I don't know what else we can do," Sarah replied, her face drawn with fatigue. "Every time we try to speak out, Blackwood's people are right there, shutting us down. We're being pushed to the margins. It's as if we don't even exist anymore." Ava shook her head. "This can't be the way forward. We can't just let him take everything we've worked for." But even as they spoke, the reality of their situation was sinking in. The colony had become divided. Those who supported Blackwood's vision of a strong, centralized government, and those who clung to the hope that Mars could still be a place of shared power and collective decision-making. The tension between the two factions was palpable, and it was only a matter of time before it would come to a head. It wasn't long before the first direct challenge to Blackwood's authority emerged. Dr. Luca Reyes, the colony's lead scientist and one of the original members of the crew, was becoming increasingly disillusioned with Blackwood's growing power. Reyes had always been a vocal supporter of the Martian Collective, and he had never been comfortable with Blackwood's authoritarian approach. His research on Martian soil and climate had led him to some troubling conclusions. The colony's resource management strategies, while effective in the short term, were unsustainable in the long run. Mars was an unforgiving planet, and Blackwood's focus on order was putting the future of the colony at risk. Reyes had tried to raise his concerns at council meetings, but his warnings had fallen on deaf ears. Blackwood's tight grip on the council meant that only those who towed the line were given a platform. Frustrated, Reyes decided to take matters into his own hands. "I can't sit by and watch the colony destroy itself," Reyes told Ava one evening, his voice heavy with resolve. "I'm going public. The people need to know what's happening. They need to understand what Blackwood is doing to this place." For the first time since landing on Mars, Ava and Sarah Mason knew that they were standing at a crossroads. They had been part of the dream to build something new, a society free from the mistakes of the past. But now, as the shadow of Blackwood's rule loomed over them, they had to ask themselves, was it too late to turn back? The mood in the colony had shifted. What had once been a hopeful, vibrant community, focused on the grand dream of Mars as a new frontier, had now become a place of fear and suspicion. Blackwood's rule was increasingly seen as a necessary evil by some, but for many others, it felt like a betrayal of everything they had fought for. Ava and Sarah knew it was only a matter of time before the pressure would burst, and the long-simmering discontent would erupt into something more dangerous. The colony, built on the foundations of freedom and collective decision-making, was on the brink of civil war. But unlike Earth, where such revolutions were often fought with guns and bombs, this war was one of ideas, loyalty, and the control of resources. In the shadows, a movement was beginning to take shape. It started as whispers among the workers, those who had been ignored and pushed to the margins under Blackwood's regime. They were the ones who felt the harshest effects of Blackwood's policies: the rationing, the surveillance, the suppression of dissent. Ava had long been in contact with members of this underground faction, but now the group was growing faster than anyone could have anticipated. People who had once trusted Blackwood's vision were starting to see the cracks in his leadership. But organizing against him was no easy task. The colony's security forces were everywhere, keeping a constant watch on the population. Every conversation in public spaces was risky, every interaction a potential threat to their cause. Yet, amid the growing surveillance, a small, dedicated group of Martian collective loyalists began to meet in secret. They called themselves the Red Horizon, a nod to the rising sun of a new era, a brighter future for Mars. They were united in their belief that the future of the colony should not belong to a single man, no matter how skilled or decisive. They were determined to take back the future of Mars, no matter the cost. Sarah Mason, once a beacon of hope for the idealistic Martian collective, now found herself entrenched in this underground struggle. She had hoped for peace, for unity, but she had come to realize that peace could not exist under tyranny. The choice was clear now: fight for Mars' future or submit to Blackwood's iron-fisted rule. The Red Horizon movement wasn't ready for an all-out war. Not yet. They didn't have the resources or manpower to take on Blackwood's forces head-to-head. But they had something that Blackwood did not: the loyalty of the people who felt betrayed, who longed for the dream of a true Martian society. Ava hesitated. She knew that any attempt to challenge Blackwood would be met with swift retaliation, but Reyes was determined. "We can't let him get away with this," he said. "The future of Mars depends on us standing up for what's right." Reyes' decision to go public came with great risk. He had hacked into the colony's communication network, a dangerous move that could lead to his immediate arrest. But the broadcast, when it finally aired, sent shockwaves through the entire colony. "I am Dr. Luca Reyes, and I have a message for everyone on Mars," he began, his face solemn but unwavering. "I've been studying the colony's long-term sustainability, and I have discovered that the path we're on is not only unsustainable, but it's also dangerous. Blackwood's leadership is focused on immediate survival, but he is ignoring the long-term health of this colony. The resources are finite, and the system we're building will crumble under the weight of its own inefficiencies." The broadcast continued with detailed reports on the colony's resource management practices, highlighting the flaws and risks that Blackwood had chosen to ignore. Reyes' words were a call to arms, urging the people of Mars to reconsider the direction the colony was heading. The response was immediate. Within hours, the broadcast had gone viral, and thousands of settlers began to question the decisions made by their new leader. Some were outraged by Reyes' actions, accusing him of sowing discord and threatening the colony's fragile stability. But many others, including those who had long been skeptical of Blackwood, saw it as a rallying cry. For the first time in months, the voice of dissent had been heard. Blackwood wasted no time in responding to the threat posed by Reyes' broadcast. He swiftly ordered the arrest of the scientist, along with any other individuals suspected of being involved in the leak. The colony's security forces were deployed to track down those responsible, and a wave of fear swept through the settlement. But even as Blackwood's forces tightened their grip on the colony, the damage had already been done. The divide between the supporters of centralized power and the advocates of the Martian collective had grown deeper. No longer could Blackwood claim to have the full support of the people. The seeds of rebellion had been planted. As the days passed, the tension within the colony only intensified. Ava knew that a confrontation was inevitable. The colony could not survive on division, but neither could it thrive under a dictatorship. The question was no longer whether Mars would have a future, it was what kind of future it would have. And as Blackwood's grip on power tightened, it was becoming clear that the path forward would be fraught with conflict. The group's first step was to disrupt Blackwood's supply lines. Water, food, and oxygen. These were the lifeblood of the colony, and Blackwood's government controlled them all. But with the Red Horizon working in the shadows, a few key shipments of supplies were rerouted or delayed, throwing a wrench into Blackwood's plans. The action was subtle but impactful. It sent a message to the settlers that the struggle for control was only beginning. But as these small victories mounted, so did the risk. Every act of rebellion was met with swift and brutal retaliation. Blackwood's forces had grown more aggressive, implementing draconian measures in an attempt to root out any and all dissent. The colony was becoming a powder keg, and Ava and Sarah knew it wouldn't be long before things exploded. The morning after a particularly disruptive sabotage mission, Ava sat alone in her quarters, going over their plans. The reality of what was to come weighed heavily on her. She couldn't ignore the growing fear in her chest, the knowledge that they were no longer just fighting for ideals, they were fighting for survival. Suddenly, her comm unit buzzed. It was a message from Elon Musk. "I need to see you," the message read simply. Ava's heart skipped. The last time she'd spoken to Musk, he had been silent about the growing power of Blackwood. His role had shifted, as though he was stepping back, watching as the people of Mars charted their own course. But something had changed. Musk had always been a man of action, and if he was reaching out now, it meant something had shifted in the power dynamics of the colony. Ava met Musk in one of the colony's older, less-traveled tunnels. He looked different, distant, perhaps more weary than before. The gleam in his eyes, the sharp confidence that had once defined him, was now clouded with something more uncertain. "I've been watching," Musk began, his voice low, "and I think you've been right all along. The colony can't survive like this. Blackwood has taken too much control, and the people, they're suffering." Ava didn't speak. She only nodded. She knew Musk had been avoiding the politics of the colony, distancing himself from the power struggles. But now, it seemed, he couldn't ignore the situation any longer. "I'm not going to let Blackwood tear down everything we've worked for," Musk continued. "But I can't do it alone. We need to show the people that they have a choice, that they have the power to change the course of this colony." Ava's mind raced. "You're asking me to lead a revolution?" "No," Musk replied, his voice softer now. "I'm asking you to lead a movement that shows the people they can reclaim their future." The next few days were a blur of secret meetings and covert actions. Musk, once again a man of action, became a key ally to the Red Horizon. Together with Sarah, Ava, and other key members of the resistance, Musk helped formulate a plan to disrupt Blackwood's grip on power. The strategy was bold, perhaps too bold. It involved taking control of the colony's central communication hub, a crucial node that Blackwood relied on to maintain control over the people. If they could take the hub, they could broadcast a message directly to every settler on Mars, revealing the truth about Blackwood's actions and giving the people the power to decide their future. It was a risky move. Blackwood's security forces would be on high alert. The odds were against them, but it was the only chance they had. Musk, Sarah, Ava, and the rest of the Red Horizon knew that once they moved, there would be no going back. As the team prepared for the mission, Ava felt a surge of determination. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for. The dream of Mars, the dream of a new world free from tyranny, was about to either live or die. And as the countdown began, Ava couldn't help but wonder, could the people of Mars truly be free again? The central communication hub stood tall in the heart of the colony, its sleek structure a testament to the power and control it had once symbolized. It was here, in the cold corridors of the facility, that Ava, Sarah, Musk, and the rest of the Red Horizon movement would make their stand. The colony's fate hung in the balance, and there was no turning back. The plan had been set in motion weeks ago, but the timing was everything. It was the dead of Martian night, a time when Blackwood's forces were less vigilant, or so they hoped. Ava stood in the shadows with her team, the weight of the mission pressing down on her shoulders. The air was thick with anticipation, and every breath she took felt heavier than the last. Sarah, ever the calm presence, gave Ava a nod. They were ready. Musk, who had once been a quiet observer, now carried the same resolve that had made him a legendary figure on Earth. "We're in this together," he said, his voice steady. "Let's show them what this colony can really be." The resistance team moved in silence, the flickering lights of the communication hub ahead casting long shadows. They had a narrow window to seize control, and once they breached the security systems, there would be no turning back. The first hurdle came quickly, a guard patrol. But they were ready. Musk, his movements precise and deliberate, took out the security cameras, allowing the team to move undetected. The entrance to the hub was guarded, but with a swift and calculated approach, the resistance neutralized the guards without alerting the rest of the facility. As they entered the command center, the hum of technology surrounded them. Ava's heart raced as she and Sarah approached the central terminal. Blackwood had always prided himself on maintaining absolute control over the colony's communication network, but now it was in the hands of those who had once been powerless. Ava's fingers hovered over the keys as she prepared to override the system. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, memories, and fears. Was this the right thing to do? Could she trust the people of Mars to rise to the occasion? The decision weighed heavily on her, but there was no time for second-guessing. A sharp click sounded as the terminal screen came to life. Ava initiated the broadcast. Within moments, the entire colony's communication grid was alive with her message. Every screen across Mars, from the lowest quarters to the highest offices, flickered with her face. "This is Ava Thompson, and this is the truth about Mars," she began, her voice resonating through the speakers. "For too long, we have been led by a man who seeks only to control us, to dictate our every move. Blackwood's vision for Mars is not our vision. We are not here to be his pawns, to live in the shadow of his empire. Mars was always meant to be a place where we could rebuild, where we could create something better than what we left behind on Earth." Ava paused, taking a deep breath. This moment was everything. "We, the people of Mars, have the power to choose our future. We are the ones who will determine our destiny, not a dictator, not an individual, but all of us. Together, we are stronger than any force that seeks to divide us. We are the Martian Collective. And from this moment forward, we take control of our own fate." The screen went dark for a moment, then flickered back to life with images of Blackwood's rise to power. His authoritarian rule, the tightened surveillance, the silencing of dissent. Ava's voice returned, this time with greater resolve. "You deserve to know the truth. The people of Mars deserve to be free. If you stand with us, we can reclaim our future. If you stand with him, we will be nothing but slaves to his rule." As the broadcast ended, Ava stepped back from the terminal. She didn't need to look at Sarah to know what was coming. The broadcast had gone live to every settler, every worker, every person who had ever called Mars home. The message was out. The people would decide. The minutes that followed felt like hours. Ava could feel the eyes of the colony on her, the weight of their expectations pressing down on her shoulders. The security forces would undoubtedly be scrambling to shut down the broadcast, but the seed had been planted. There was no way to take back what had been said. Then, the first ripple came. A message flashed on Ava's screen. It was from an anonymous source. "We stand with you. The dream of Mars is alive." Then another message. "We're with you, Ava. Together, we will make Mars free." It was the beginning of a movement that could not be stopped. People across the colony, those who had remained silent for so long, were now speaking out. Messages of solidarity poured in from every corner of Mars. The broadcast had sparked something powerful that Blackwood couldn't control. But Blackwood wasn't one to surrender easily. Within hours, Blackwood's forces moved to seize control of the communication hub. They stormed the building, their guns raised, their voices commanding. But it was too late. The resistance had already prepared for this moment. The security systems were already compromised. The doors to the hub locked down, trapping Blackwood's forces inside. Outside, the people of Mars were rallying, flooding the streets with chants of freedom and unity. Blackwood arrived at the hub just as the people took to the streets in mass protests. His eyes burned with fury, but there was nothing he could do. His power had evaporated the moment Ava's words reached the people. He tried to make a desperate broadcast, but the system had already been disabled by the resistance. Ava stood at the front of the crowd, Sarah by her side. Musk, too, was there, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. The message was clear. Mars belonged to the people, and they would never again allow a single man to control their future. It was a long road ahead, but the tide had turned. Blackwood's regime crumbled as the people of Mars reclaimed their voices. The Martian Collective, once thought to be a dream, was now becoming a reality. Ava looked up at the red skies above, the dawn breaking over the horizon. It was a new day for Mars, one full of uncertainty but also possibility. The battle had been won, but the true challenge was just beginning. As the sun rose higher, Ava knew that this was just the beginning of a new era. Mars had been freed, but now it was time to build something even greater. A society of equals, a true collective. The dream was alive, and together, they would see it through. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?